Okay. Hi everyone. Right, that's us. Ready to go. Hey Alex.
Aloha. We good? We going? Hey, Connor, how's it going?
Yeah, good.
That totally worked without a hitch. There were no problems setting that up at all. That was perfect. Yeah.
Uh, yeah, fun times. Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah.
Um,
Am I really loud? Am I like really, really loud? But
no, no, not for me.
I can mute myself actually.
Like, is I'm super quiet. Right. Okay. Which? Oh shit. Which one am I? Is it the mic? Is it this one? The microphone? Is that me? Did I put
Yeah,
myself
you'll be
on?
Mick Orcs.
I'll be Mecox. Yeah, that's that one there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mash it.
Right. How's that in terms of? It seems like there's a wee bit of a delay.
It's all right. There's always a delay.
Okay. Yeah. So, it's been a while. I suppose it's been almost
Hi.
2 years since we started.
It's almost 2 years. I was thinking about this earlier. It was like I was thinking. It feels like it's been 2 months or something. This time is kind of fucked at the moment. It's pretty odd.
Right. Sorry. 2 months since what we started the live streaming. Or
No, I mean it feels like it's been. It feels like 2 years, near enough 2 years. Feels like it's about 2 months. It's just because there's just so much shit going on all the time. So anyway,
interesting.
yeah, we're back and we're doing new stuff apparently. Although I haven't got a clue. Well, actually, I do have a bit of a clue now of what we're doing today. But yeah, Connor's going to be hosting.
Okay, doke. So yeah, let's get to it then. Just need to get the thing open. There we go. Right, and then press the magic button.
Ah, the magic button.
Is that it? Do we have it?
Hopefully that's it. Hopefully we have it.
Do we have it? Sorry, I need an external confirmation. I know there's a delay. We're just gonna wait for it. Please be patient with us, dear viewers, as we.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Please always be patient with us, dear viewers.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's going well. Right. Okay. So it's a rather demure presentation, but I would have made it fancier, but I tried that and it broke the file, so I just had to leave it at the sort of like the rough edit. It's fine. But either way,
Tech, man, it's fucking great, isn't it?
right. Basically, the topic for today is it's all around this term Aryan and
Yeah.
what that means. So
Cool.
I'll just get straight into it. Basically, just how do we define this term? Depends on which part of the world that you live in. In the West, it tends to have rather negative connotations. As you can
Well,
see,
I mean, depending on who you are, for some people, it's a very positive connotations.
yeah,
So.
yeah, it's like it's the best connotation possible. Yeah, I mean, as you can even see, like between like the black and white pictures, and then like the left, and then the color pictures on the right, it's kind of provides that contrast.
Exactly.
So, yeah. But basically, like in the West, most people are familiar with the term through National Socialism, the Third Reich, and all that kind of stuff. But if you but if you go to Asia, especially the these kind of countries like Iran and India, that they're like, well, we're Aryans. That's just who we are, you know. So here's a couple of examples.
Yeah.
So the top one, these people are called Lurs. They're an Iranian people. So in Iran as a country, it's kind of like most of the people there are Iranian, but they're all different. Like so you have like Persians, they're the biggest group, they're the majority, and then you have the Lurs, and you have some other random people as well. And the bottom picture that's Indian women celebrating Holi, which is a Hindu festival, and it's a little bit complicated in these countries, especially India, because in Iran it's more like a ethnonym, so like a term for an ethnicity, and that's just like how most of the people identify, whereas in India it's a little bit more complicated. So I'll just get straight into that part. Oh fuck. India disappeared. So for some reason
it did.
I fucking hope
the Indian slide disappeared. That's all right.
Oh god,
too far away. It's fine. We'll deal with Iran.
Yeah. So well, I mean, the Iran picture is nice because I mean it gives you like a very, very detailed picture of like all of the Iranian peoples in Asia. As you can see, there's
that is very detailed.
Yeah.
As
you can see within Iran, you've got a lot of Persians, but again, there's other people as well. The Kurds, they are that big red splatter all over the Middle East, basically. And then you have other people like the Balochis, they're down in the bottom. They're the sort of like browny yellowy kind of one. And I think that's the Pashtuns in purple up there. So, but yeah, from an Iranian perspective, it's just like it's really just to do with like the language and culture you have. So if you are if you're speaking an Iranian language, you are an Aryan as far as they're concerned. In India, it's a bit different. If the map was here, it would show you that there's in India there's broadly like a north-south divide with people in the north of India. They speak what are called Indo-Aryan languages, which are related closely to the Iranian languages, whereas the people in the south of India tend to speak other languages, mostly the Dravidian group as it's called. But but in India itself, the term Aryan has more connotations than just ethno-linguistic. It also has associations with a certain type of behavior and attitude and things like that. It's associated with nobility, like not just as like a social caste or whatever, but also just like nobility as a
character quality, being a noble person.
So that's kind of interesting. And I suppose the question is really, how did this term, which is basically, you have basically Asian people using for themselves in different, slightly different ways, but it's basically just like their term for themselves. How did this come to be used by not just the Nazis? Like the Nazis got the term Aryan from other like European scholars, basically, like in the 19th century, and it all goes back to the fact that certain linguists in Europe, they started to study languages across the world, and they realized that actually all of these languages, so down at the bottom you've got in the golden color, that's all of the Indo-Iranian languages, the Aryan language families, and they are actually related to not all the languages spoken in Europe, but the vast majority of them. The exceptions being
but like 2 or 3.
It is most of them. Like the Indo-European like non-Indo-European languages are the exception in Europe. They include Finnish, Estonian, Hungarian, and Basque. They're the most they're really the only ones left. Sami as well, I guess, which is similar to Finnish. So once these scholars found a similarity between all of these languages, then they had to explain, like, well, why is there a similarity between them? And the most obvious assumption was basically that they must have some sort of common origin, and that's probably a racial origin. Long story short, I mean, we're about 200 years on from scholars starting to think about this, and we know now because of genetics that it basically comes from these people. The guy on the right is an artistic example of this particular kind of culture. I think, yeah, that's a Yamnaya pastoralist. That's the Yamnaya culture, which was more or less. Some people like to argue about this, but we'll just say for simplicity, it was the sort of like the Yamnaya kind of horizon, orbit, whatever. On the steppe, like right in the middle of this map, on the Ukrainian steppe, the sort of dark green patch there. That's where these people came from. I'm not going into detail about like their origins or whatever. They were sort of like a mix of a couple of different races of people themselves. But basically, this is the group of people that then just expanded across Europe and Asia, and that is where the Indo-European languages come from. Like, we know this because of the genetic markers that people in all of these Indo-European speaking areas carry. There's like exceptions to the rule. So, for example, like most Basques carry haplogroup R1b, which is associated with these people, the steppe herders. And there's a lot of, for example, Dravidians in India. They're not Indo-European speaking, but they carry R1a, which is a similar kind of steppe herder thing. But by and large, this is the pattern that does prove that like this is the particular race that spread these languages across Eurasia. Now, back in the day, this man in particular, Friedrich Schlegel, fucking Germans. Anyway,
Schlegel,
yeah. He was basically the first to link the German word Ehre, which means honor, to this word Arya, for the in the Indo-Iranian languages, and on this basis, he proposed this is what the Proto-Indo-Europeans called themselves, So because it was an ethnonym, or is an ethnonym for like the Aryans, and is also kind of an ethnonym for like the Indo-Aryans as well, it must have been the same for the European ones as well, because of this, because he linked the word Era to Aryan. Now, I've got these cultures here. So corded ware, and then all of Fatinovo, Balanovo, Abashevo, Sintashta, and Andronovo. These are all places in Russia, and they basically just all denote like quite specific like subcategories of Indo-European culture that are specifically related to the Indo-Iranians or the Aryans in Asia, right? So looking at the archaeology, looking at genetics, they did come from Eastern Europe, and they did spread into Asia, and they brought their languages there. Now, we know that's what happened. Schlegel, on the other hand, he believed in the out of India theory. So he thought that it made sense that the Aryans actually came from India originally. But, I mean, if I go back to the previous map here, even scholars at this time, like in the 19th century, they pointed out, like, if you look at this map, right, and you look at how all the different language families are colored, you notice in Europe there's a lot of variation, whereas in Asia it's all just the same language family, and that's kind of a surefire way, like, to tell that these languages came from Europe originally, because there's more variation. You tend to have less variation in language and genetics in places that like people go to from somewhere else. And this is reflected in the genetics as well. So like in, for example, haplogroup R1, pretty much all of these Aryans, Indo-Iranian people in Asia, they pretty much all carry the same haplogroup, which is this one. It's haplogroup R1a Z93. It's a specific subclade of R1a as well. There's loads of other R1a in Europe, which is related to this, but it's not the same. And as you can see, the two groups that have the most R1a of this kind are the Pashtuns and the Kyrgyz peoples. which is interesting because the Kyrgyz aren't they're not Aryan speakers, they're Turkic people, but there's a lot of overlap between these peoples because there seems to be evidence that a lot of like the
steppe culture.
What?
Because of steppe culture, because I mean, it's what people in Central Asia were kind of doing, and there was a lot of admixture between Proto-Turkic and, I guess at that point, Proto-Indo-Iranian would be Sintashta and all of that.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, well, it seems to have been quite one way, in the sense that as far as the Turkic languages, somehow, like this haplogroup here, this is the most common haplogroup among Turkic peoples. Some Turkic peoples carry very little of it, but it is the one that you see like the most. But we know from this, this genetic stuff about where RNA comes from Europe. So it means that it's not originally a Turkic haplogroup. It means that basically Scythians, who also carried this haplogroup, Z93, they were adopting Turkic languages. They were probably marrying Turkic women a lot. And this kind of thing happened. Actually, do you see up in the top right-hand corner of the map, that little sort of bulb there in Siberia, just at the sort of corner between, like, you've got Siberia and then Kazakhstan, Mongolia, and China. That's where they reckon the Turkic languages come from, based on like studying the language and working out like which words have most likely not been borrowed from other languages. So they reckon that area with the wee bulb, that's the Altai Mountains. So that's where they think the Turkic languages come from.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
So, as far as the meaning of the term Aryan, just to get back to the main subject, it's not as clear cut. Linguists don't tend to buy the idea that Schlegel had, which is that it's just a cognate to Ere. There's apparently problems with this because, for example, the Indo-European linguists, they've linked the roots of Ere or R in Old English to a Proto-Germanic Aitzo, which is not obviously the same as Arya. They've even considered the possibility that the name Aryan is not actually an Indo-European word. They seem to struggle to find an Indo-European root for the word Aryan, and they've actually put forward the possibility that it was a name given to them by other people, and that they adopted it for themselves, like somewhere in Asia. So.
Well, that would mean that there'd have to be a consolidated group of people between Iran and India calling all of those people the same thing.
Yeah.
Surely. Which seems a little bit suspect to me. It seems more likely to, unless maybe it was something that somebody during the Sintashta period, or Fatyanova, Bolanova, or whatever, maybe somebody up around there that wasn't Indo-European speaking started calling them that, and then when they spread subsequently into Iran and India, maybe then they kept that exonym, is what they call it, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, that's the implication, is that if it was an exonym, they did take it on as an endonym, so they started calling themselves that. And they still call themselves that today. It has been linked potentially to other Indo-European words. So there's Old Irish, I think that's pronounced Ira, which means freeman or nobleman.
Ira,
and distinguish... or it's sorry, the specific thing there is that it's a freeman, generally, but when you're comparing a nobleman and a commoner, it means nobleman, basically. So...
cool, all right.
And the Proto-Celtic there is Arios, which is also linked to this name Ariovistus. He was a Suebi chieftain who fought Julius Caesar. So Arias is thought to be distinguished or esteemed. So I'm sort of thinking, I'm not sure if I buy the idea that it's a non-Indo-European exonym, because the Aryo part of Ariovistus really does seem to match the meaning of the Sanskrit word Arya, which is noble, honorable, respectable. I don't know about kind.
It'd be quite impressive if they both managed to get this from two different sources, if they both ended up with this association between the sound and this meaning. So yeah.
So yeah, it's possibly I think that's pronounced Herios, is the possible Proto-Indo-European name for it. again, some linguists dispute it, but that's not really super important here. I guess the point that I'm going to get to is more about the development of the concept of Aryan in the West, really. So just like in the East, it's really just like I said before, the Iranian peoples. That's just what they call themselves. They call themselves Aryans. Among the Indo-Aryan speakers, they associate it more with this concept of Arya, nobility, honor, respectability, and kindness. In the West, probably the first person to actually propose this, going from Schlegel's idea. So basically taking that idea that the Proto-Indo-Europeans called themselves Aryans. This was taken up by this man, Count Arthur de Gobineau. He was a very interesting man. He was a French aristocrat who somehow survived his family somehow survived the revolution. Yeah, you can see 1816. He was born like after the revolution, but he was still a nobleman somehow. But he wasn't, in that period in France, like nobility weren't doing very well. Apparently, he had to work in a post office, and he found that quite a degrading job. It just reminds me of
mortifying. Mortifying, I said.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, for someone of his lineage to be doing a job like that, he's important because I'll get to that in a second. I've got these notes though here, like just a few more things about him, just because he's such an interesting person. It says that when he was in Sweden, although he was he was a Catholic his whole life, but that's really just because that was the traditional religion of the French nobility. Apparently he privately abandoned his belief in Christianity. He was very interested in the pagan religion of the Vikings, which seemed more authentically Aryan to him. And he basically just stayed a Catholic for political reasons. And he only wanted a Catholic burial because that's how all his family members were buried. It wasn't because he believed in it. So he actually seems to have been an Odinist of some kind. In his
it's kind of badass, French Odinist.
Yeah, like Alain de Benoist actually. That's what he seems to be into. It says as well, like reflecting his disdain for ordinary people. He said French aristocrats like himself were the descendants of the Germanic Franks who conquered the Roman province of Gaul in the 5th century AD, while the common French people were the descendants of racially inferior Celtic and Mediterranean people. Now, maybe without the racial judgment, that is true. That's an interpretation, like the judgment to see whether they're racially superior or inferior, these groups. But what he said was basically true. That is what happened. Is that in the late Roman Empire, the Franks came in and they took over Gaul, and they ruled as the aristocracy over the locals, who were sort of like they were basically Celts, but they'd also got a lot of through the Romans, like Mediterranean people moving in too. So. And where I want to go with this guy is he wrote an essay called An Essay on the Inequality of the Human Races. And his argument is that civilizations are founded when one tribe makes war on another and then takes slaves from those of the other tribe, who are basically another race of people. But this is actually where civilization comes from. But his central point of this essay was that certain peoples are inherently gifted with the vision to create civilization when this actually happens. So he's saying that This has happened throughout history. Like, tribes would attack each other and take slaves, but only white people. And should also note that he defined white in quite a particular way because he included Middle Eastern people. He considered them to be white. So it wasn't just Europeans. But he did subdivide white people into subcategories, and the best were the Aryans, Proto-Indo-Europeans. So, what's interesting as well is that he's been kind of vindicated as far as the relationship between different races is concerned, because I've come across some like old-fashioned arguments from the 19th century and stuff where people were claiming that like, oh, are Middle Eastern people, are they like a mixture between white people and like, East Asians or something? Is that why they're maybe like a bit darker than Europeans? But actually the it seems like whenever they have tested how people relate to each other as groups, people in the Middle East and Northern Africa as well, they sort of form a cluster with Europeans. Like all of these groups have more in common with each other than they do with everyone else in Asia and Africa. So
that would be because there's E1B in Europe and there's IJ, obviously.
Yeah, like if you're thinking about it in the Y-DNA terms, but it's that's a big part of it. Although it ultimately just has to do with like which people were continuing to mix with each other, interbreed, intermarry.
Yeah, the Mediterranean's a massive highway, so
yeah. Whereas like East Asia, Southeast Asia sort of became a bit more separate. But then at later,
it's a lot harder to get to.
Yeah, but then the later periods, people ended up kind of mixing as well. So, for example, like India, apparently, might not expect it from the way that Indians look, but they're actually quite mixed between East and West Eurasian. It does depend.
You can see it more in like Nepalese.
Sorry?
You can see that more in like Nepalese people. You can see they've got some very noticeable East Asian facial features sometimes, but they're also, Indian skin tones, and obviously it's a more of an Indic culture, language, and so on.
Yeah, but I mean even like the Dravidian, like South Indian people, they don't look very East Asian, but genetically they're actually closer to East Asians than West Eurasians.
Oh, that's curious.
Yeah. No, that's something really interesting. Have you heard of Negritos?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So for anybody that's not aware, Negritos are they're basically like black-skinned people that live in places like the Philippines, and they look a lot like sub-Saharan Africans, but they are not closely related to them at all. They are actually more closely related to East Asian populations generally. So there's something really interesting.
They're more closely related to us as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Basically, yeah, because the Eurasians and the sub-Saharan Africans kind of diverged. So, that's what's really interesting. There's something they've not quite figured out with the phenotypes. In a lot of places, they actually seem to reflect more the environment than actually like the genetics, which that's an interesting point, I suppose, for like I suppose a lot of the racial interpretations of like why people look a certain way, because that kind of that brings in more like the nurture argument, if you see what I mean, like that people are conditioned by their environment as opposed to things being just completely innate, if you see what I mean. Because if things were just if people's phenotypes were just innate and they were to do with their genetics as a whole, you would expect Negritos and East Asians to look the same, but they don't, even though they're actually quite closely related to each other. So, just gonna grab a drink of water. Anyway, many a fun tangent. Right. So, Gobineau's central thesis, apart from the fact that, well, he basically what he thought was that tribes raiding each other when white people do it, and again remembering this includes Middle Eastern people, that the tribe that is enslaving the people of another tribe. They bring them in and they put them to work, and then that builds civilization. And that civilizations collapse when those distinctions are not maintained and those groups start to mix with each other, basically. And the evidence that he put forward for this is that he described 10 civilizations. And these were the Indian, Egyptian. The third one is what he called Assyrian. And the reason he called it Assyrian was just because he wrote this essay in the 1850s, and Sumer hadn't been discovered at that point. So this is why we shouldn't be too harsh on someone like Gobineau, because he just didn't know a lot of things that we've since discovered, especially when it comes to the genetics. And I suppose what's interesting is that that's just basically what I'm wanting to go over is to what extent was his were his ideas vindicated by genetics, and to what extent they've been disproven by genetics, and so on. And he considered the Assyrian civilization to be white but non-Aryan, because they spoke Semitic languages and so on. There's the Greek civilization, the Chinese, the Roman, Germanic civilization, which I suppose that kind of only really emerged like as a result of taking over the Western Roman Empire. And then what he called grouped together these civilizations in the Americas, pre-Columbian. So one that he called the Alleghanian, which I had to look hard to try and find out what he meant by that, and it seems like he was referring to what's called the Mississippian culture in North America, now the United States, and also the Mexican and Peruvian cultures. And going by his reasoning, all of these civilizations must have had some sort of white admixture, So even for those pre-Columbian civilizations in the Americas, they must have had some white blood, basically. Otherwise, they couldn't have created civilization, according to Gobineau. And it was same for the Assyrians, that they would have been white but just non-Aryan. And Gobineau believed that all the other civilizations, so Indian, Egyptian, Greek, Chinese, Roman, and Germanic civilizations, that's about 6 or 7, he believed that they were all Indo-European or Aryan created. So we'll just look through all of these examples and see what the genetics has to say about it. I basically just pulled up some these are just pictures, like examples of the Assyrian and Persian civilizations, which I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about, just to say that Assyrian civilization was sort of like, it was a Semitic one in the Middle East, and there was actually an Indo-Aryan people called the Mitanni in the Middle East at the time, and the Assyrians actually ended up conquering them. But Gobineau, I actually don't know if they knew about the Mitanni when Gobineau was writing, to be honest. So that puts an interesting spin on things. So there were Aryans present in the Middle East, but he didn't think that Aryans created civilization in the Middle East, and I don't either, because we know, like, the Sumerian culture is the first civilization there, and there's no evidence that it was founded by Indo-Europeans. I know there's one guy out there that likes to claim that Sumerian is actually a variant of Latvian. I don't think that's true, personally. There's no genetic evidence for a link. The Persians...
People who are claiming that Etruscan is an Indo-European language.
Yeah. It's actually Welsh, don't you?
Yeah, of course. Comes from Egyptian Welsh, don't you know?
Yeah, the
hieroglyphics.
The Egyptian Israelite Welsh, our true British heritage,
Jesus Christ.
And just a quick mention as well about the Persian Empire, the older one, the Achaemenid Empire. Again, that was Aryans. They called themselves Aryans, literal Aryans. They moved into the Iranian plateau, and their civilization was kind of like, I guess it was maybe a mix between culturally the Aryan thing, which had come from the steppe, and influenced by like the Middle Eastern civilizations that were already there, really, in the Bronze Age. So, right. So, with Indian culture, what's interesting about India is that despite this kind of north-south divide culturally, linguistically, these are a couple of examples in temples, and to me they just look really similar. Like the kind of Indian civilization is generally considered one thing, even if there's like that north-south divide to some extent, you know. But the problem with Gobineau's theory is that he thought the Indian civilization was a result of Aryans moving in. Now, as I explained before, yes, Aryans did move in, because the R1A haplogroup shows us that. Actually, I'll go all the way back to that just to show, again, just to remind us. You can see basically where R1A is. I think with the exception of that wee dot down in the south there, I think that's a Dravidian-speaking area. But for the most part, the
map cuts it off as well, but there's a lot in Sri Lanka too.
Ah, right. Yeah, because the Sinhalese, they're like the majority in Sri Lanka, and they're Indo-Aryan speakers, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, so again, like with the exception of, we'll just ignore Sri Lanka. The map's ignoring Sri Lanka, so will we. So, but, no, that's a fair point. You've mentioned them, actually, the Sinhalese. But yes, like with the exception of the Sinhalese, the map does show like that broad kind of the darker areas are up in the north, especially northwest. So the Aryans did come in from the north. The out of India theory is just fucking not true. It's like I've seen Indians seriously try and argue it, and it's like my brain was actually hurting.
There's a curious thing in the Vedas.
Yeah.
If you read the Vedas in terms of what they think the chronology of composition is, there's a strange east-west trajectory, which I haven't been able to wrap my head around at all.
Sure.
Other than to say perhaps they're encoding, myths or lore from before the Aryans actually got there. Early Sanskrit might have been employed to record Indus Valley civilization stuff. As possible in my view.
Okay. Hang on, but how does that? Oh, yeah. So you mean just like they were using Sanskrit to talk about stuff that happened in the Indus Valley times? Yeah. That's what I think is probably most likely as well. India's interesting. I'm going to go on a tangent about India because I'm already talking about it. But what I found interesting about India in this kind of period, the genetics and the languages show us that the Aryans were moving into India, right? But if you just looked at the archaeology, you wouldn't know. You would probably think you would probably believe the out of India theory if you just looked at the archaeology, because it's just complete continuity from the Bronze Age into the Iron Age. There's literally like nothing really except I think for the chariots. Actually, even then they still had.
Yeah, that's the only thing is the chariots.
Even then they had wheeled vehicles. I think in the Indus Valley thing. Might not have been. I don't think it was the same as the.
But this again, wagon versus chariot.
Yeah, sure. So like the chariot, like the two-wheeled chariot, like we know that is a creation of the Santashta people. The Santashta, they were up in was it like Kazakhstan, like the bit where Kazakhstan sort of borders Russia there. And so they introduced that, and that obviously became an important part of the Aryan culture in India. But in terms of their like burial and stuff, like cremation and stuff like that, they just kept doing what they were doing there before. So that's what I find interesting about India is how much like the Aryans came in, and there seems to have been a lot of like, it used to be called like the Aryan invasion. And people have started to say now, like, because of this genetic stuff, that it's like, oh well, maybe it vindicates the Aryan invasion thing. But it's like, I personally look at this and I don't think the term invasion is right for what seems to have happened, because it seems like you had these men, specifically men, although in some places actually it seems like it was more women. So the Kalash people.
No. Oh wait, hang on. Up in the Himalayas.
No, they're not in the Himalayas. They're up in the north of Pakistan. Near the Hindu.
Okay.
They're near the Hindu Kush, more than Himalayas, right? They're in Pakistan.
Okay.
Now the Kalash, they're another Aryan people, and they're really old school. Like they're like pre-Hindu Aryan kind of thing. Like they still practice like the really really old Aryan, Indo-Aryan thing, and I had a look at their genetics, and they actually seem to be a bit more. Their Aryan heritage seems to come more from women, Aryan women. So, because most of their Y DNA seems local, but they've got a lot of like haplogroup U5 and U2 and things like that. Stuff that would come from the Indo-Europeans. So, but that's them. They're like a special case. For the most part, when you look at people in India, it's this haplogroup R1AZ93, which comes from the men, but most of the maternal stuff is just local. And when you consider this in terms of, so the language comes from the Aryans. A lot of the gods, like the Vedic gods and so on, they have Indo-European roots. And yeah, the language and everything, Sanskrit. But there's a continuity in their burial customs, the fact that they keep doing cremation, the material culture. They introduced the chariot, but then when you consider the possibility that they were incorporating memories of
Mm.
stuff like was it the river Saraswati and stuff like that, which had dried up apparently by the time that the Aryans were supposed to have arrived. So they're basically taking local tradition, translating it into their own language, like so they're completely erasing the local language, but they're completely keeping their lore. That's really interesting. It's such a weird kind
Doesn't
of.
that sound an awful lot like what happened with? I mean, we don't know about the language necessarily, but with Bell Beakers, you've been saying a lot that they seem to when Bell Beaker people were coming into the British Isles, there was a lot of retention of Neolithic customs.
Yeah.
They even sort of enshrined some of that stuff.
Yeah, the difference though is that in the British Isles there was a lot more replacement of the locals. Right, so in India it seems like it was mostly like these Aryan men coming in and they were marrying local women, but the men were keeping their language and they were teaching that to their children, whereas in the British Isles. It was much more of like a mass population replacement by men and women of the local Neolithic people. But yeah, no, I get what you mean. Like, it is weird. Like some of the examples I've actually seen them in Scotland, places where like the Beaker folk coming in start building stone circles that look like the Neolithic ones, but they're slightly different and stuff like that. It is really interesting.
We've got them here as well. They're made out of like some of them are concrete conglomerate, and they're done in the fashion of stone circles, but different materials, possibly different uses. But I can't quite. They're later. There's like a gap,
right?
Because
okay.
I mean, I don't think Derby has got for however many centuries it elapsed.
Yeah, so that was definitely a thing. So so that's the thing. Like when these people moved in, Indo-Europeans, Aryans, whatever. They don't seem to have been quite the, they weren't the Mongols, put it that way, in terms of how they interacted with the local people. Yeah. I'm sure. I'm sure they killed people. Like I don't think they were a bunch of hippies. Like they had a lot of weapons and they could fight, and they almost certainly did kill people. They probably killed quite a lot of people. At the same time,
they probably didn't have to kill that many after a certain point. It would have just been pretty clear. They've got the weapons. They've got the military superiority. There's no point in fighting these guys. Best to try and find some way to integrate. Clearly, which ended up being, what happened in the long run.
Yeah. So, unfortunately for Gobineau, the sites like Mohenjo-Daro, all the sites might not be able to see it very well, but like pretty much all the Indus Valley sites are in Pakistan. There's a few in India I can see. I think there's a handful in the Indian Punjab and Gujarat. But this site only began to be excavated about 10 years after Gobineau published his essay. And it basically discovered that, like, no, the Aryans did not introduce civilization to India. They already had their own civilization, along the Indus River in Punjab. It was very advanced, very organized, but also there's not really that much evidence of like social hierarchy at the same time. It seems to have been pretty like people. I'm not an expert on the Indus Valley civilization, so if there's anybody that knows more details about it, even if you, Alex, know more about it, feel free to add anything. But from what I'd gathered, it seems to have just been like lots and lots of people, and they were just like building collectively towards like these like very big settlements and stuff. So, and
that sounds like Kukateni Tripilia. It's
yeah.
Back of distinct sort of, there's no leaders, there's no clear like division between priests and regular people. It's just, here's the big settlement. We all set our houses up. If you want to add to it, plop a plot down there.
Ah, right. In that case, I think if it's anything like Kukateni Tripulia, I'm guessing that it probably wouldn't have been what we would necessarily consider egalitarian, just more like a hierarchy of influence rather than something very kind of rigid, if you see what I mean. So it's probably like,
yeah,
I wouldn't expect it to have been completely egalitarian, but it's not what you would maybe consider.
Because people would have been better or worse at different jobs. And some people would have been praised for being, like, hey, this is the best fisher, this is the best hunter, this guy's the best organizer, this is the best. This guy designs the buildings, and he makes sure that they, stand up for long. So people would have had respect. They probably would have been afforded, gifts. There would have been gift economies. People would have been giving more to. We respect these people. We'll give them more. Some other people don't get much of a look in because they're not that special. But in terms of like, dwelling style, how people are living, everybody's more or less on the same level. But you can kind of see from that picture of Mohenjo-Daro, like, well, maybe not actually, I can't see how close we are to it. I've looked at Mohenjo-Daro. It looks like a lot of the domiciles are same kind of dimensions, same orientations. Is it the doorways faced east to the sun or something? Everybody's basically doing the same thing in terms of your house. It's just this is a house. This is how it's done. You could be head honcho of whatever, I don't know if it's a guild system or whatever it could be, but you're living in the same kind of building as somebody who, I don't know, street sweeper or something else. Or somebody's delivering a card.
Yeah. That's what I would expect. It would be like a sort of, I don't know, like a loose kind of hierarchy. There's no indication of regality of any kind. That's more something that you would see in places like Sumer and Egypt, for example, and China as well.
Yeah.
But this kind of civilization, not so much. And those are just the dates. It was quite a long period that it's been dated between 3,300 BC and 1,900 BC. So that's quite a long time. That's basically like the beginning. Just to ask,
when are they thinking that the Aryans actually started coming into India? It's about 1500 BC.
Yeah, something like that.
A bit before that.
So that's the other thing as well, is like I think, because I remember there was that archaeologist back in the day. I think it was getting about like 90 to 100 years ago now, Mortimer Wheeler. And he looked at Mohenjo-Daro and saw like evidence of like skeletons strewn about everywhere, and he's like, it must have been the Aryans. They must have been come in, kicked ass, taken names, But I think since then the archaeologists have been looking at it and it's like, seems like the civilization was kind of going in a bit of a downturn. Like by the time they got there, like it had already seen its best days. I think so.
India must also have had some kind of climatic decline during the Bronze Age?
I think so, but I don't know enough about it. This is just quite a basic overview of these kind of things. We can possibly go into more detail at another point. I don't know if you'd like to do a presentation about India. So I think you know a bit more about India than I do.
Bloody hell. Yeah.
But either way, so that's my point. So with India, Gobineau claimed that Indian civilization came from the Aryans, whereas we can see from the Indus Valley civilization, no, they already had a civilization before the Aryans came in, and it seems like what actually happened was they had a civilization, and it had its heyday, and then it went into decline, and then the Aryans showed up, and then a civilization, like, it started to develop again in the Iron Age from then on, and of course the Aryans were involved in that, but it was already there before it got there. Like, they did not, like, the people in the pre-Aryan Indians were already capable of creating a civilization. They didn't need the Aryans to do that, is my point about them. So
yeah.
Right, moving to Egypt. Very old civilization. Similar sort of time, actually, to the Indus Valley. It's saying about 3000 BC. Actually, that seems a wee bit later than the Indus Valley. Now, the odd thing about this is that Gobineau claimed that Egyptian civilization was founded by an Indo-Aryan colony from India. Now, like I've said before, everything to do with the Aryans moving into India, that's all proven. It's just that, it didn't happen the way he thought it did.
A lot later, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But the Aryans did move into India. Now, where he got the idea that Indo-Aryans moved into Egypt and founded that civilization, I couldn't figure out where he got the idea.
Connor, they're civilized, number one, and they're brown, so they must come from India.
Sure.
No, easy. Just, it's right there in front of you, Connor. Can't you see? Look, Anubis is brown, and the Pharaoh's brown, so clearly they're Indians, and that means that they're Aryans, and that's how they had this amazing civilization.
Yeah. So even though they spoke an Afro-Asiatic language and not an Indo-European one, like the Afro-Asiatic language, just like...
Well, they had the nobility. They had the nobility and the honor to take on the language of the natives.
Isn't
foreshadowing some of the woke culture we have today?
Isn't that kind of a pussy move? Like, if you're this big conquering Aryan, don't you want to enforce your language on everyone else? Isn't that the idea?
Maybe you want to enforce your superior morality, your spiritual sort of elevation or something. I don't know. I'm trying to get inside Gobineau's head at this point, because to me, Egypt is Egyptian. It's not. Yeah, it's not Indo-Aryan or anything like that.
Yeah. And, well, let's take a look at the genetics. What are they? Oh, they are Middle Eastern. Actually, they're the ancient Egyptians, they say at the top there, they were more like modern Middle Eastern people than modern Egyptians are. Modern Egyptians are slightly more shifted towards, like, other African people.
Wasn't there there's this whole part in their history about Nubians coming up north after a certain point?
Yeah, because, like, the Egyptians... The Egyptian civilization, because it was so old, its heyday was so long ago, it went through a couple of periods of decline. So I think the Nubian phase was... I think you had, like, the earlier kingdom, and then it went through a bit of decline. That might... Again, I'm not an expert on Egyptian history. I'm still just doing, like, a broad sweep just to kind of have a go at Gobineau. Or, well, not completely, but, like, a wee bit. But yeah, the Nubians were in control, and I think the New Kingdom came after that, or maybe the Nubian period was after the New Kingdom. I can't remember. But yeah, it had its ups and downs. So, but yeah, the point seems to be that I don't know if it's because of that period. I actually don't know at what point the Egyptians started to look more African than Middle Eastern. But well, I mean, if you look closely at the map, the Egyptians are clustering very closely with, who are these people? Palestinians, Bedouins, just kind of the people that live, like, right next to Egypt, basically, just to the east of it.
Yeah. Which makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
Yeah. But yeah, again, like, for the Weewaskangs people as well, this is just like the out of India. It's like, yeah, this is another, like, up yours to them, because it's just like, yeah, the ancient Egyptians, they were Middle Eastern. They were just Middle Eastern people. They weren't, well, they probably were not white European for the most part. No, they most certainly were more like Middle Eastern. But this is where I'll bring in like this next part.
There would have been some white people about, probably. I mean, there were white people around at the time.
Well,
oh yeah, okay. Well, if you're going to bring in R1b and everything, then fair enough. Yeah.
Right. Tutankhamun carried haplogroup R1b. For some reason, for some infuriating reason, they did not like go into the subclade. They're like, oh, it's R1b. It's like, which R1b? Because that's important. But I have
definitely L21, man.
Yeah.
R1b L21. He was Irish, man. Don't you know?
Yes. Michael Tassarian, eat your heart out. Yeah. But it's probably V88. And now this map that I've got here from Wikipedia, that's just a crop map of R1b, right? But this section that I've got, that is V88 that's on the map, pretty much. There might be some other stuff in there, like the further north, but that is pretty much V88, right? And from what I found from V88, the reason why I think that Tutankhamun carried V88 is because it's still found in Egypt today. And it is basically an African R1b, but it doesn't originally come from Africa. It does come from Europe. And I traced it weirdly, like the earliest examples of V88 come from places like Ukraine and the Balkans. And those are like hunter-gatherers in like the Mesolithic. Some Neolithic farmers carried it as well. And now it's found in Africa, with the biggest cluster being there on the border between Nigeria and Cameroon. So what that suggests is that so you had like some of these hunter-gatherers in Southeast Europe, Balkans. The Neolithic farmers come in from Anatolia, Turkey, and there's maybe one man in particular, or a small group of men. They marry into these Neolithic communities, and then their descendants end up just moving to Africa and having this mad like founder effect in like Central Africa.
Yeah,
it's fucking mental. Like.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, to be honest.
Yeah, but we have a good idea probably where they actually went down. They seem to have actually come down from Italy, Sicily, and then into North Africa, and then just somehow ended up in Central Africa. That's where most of it is. But there is a bit in Egypt as well. So actually, there's a cluster in Egypt. Actually, when you look at it there, that's up in like the north west of the country. So I don't know what that means. But yeah,
it's the closest bit to Italy, near enough, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, but I mean, there is always a possibility that Tutankhamun will come back as some other subclade of R1b, which would still be probably Indo-European.
Haven't they found other relatives of his who have got V88? I'm sure, or not necessarily relatives of his, but there have been other R1b burials discovered in Egypt where they did do subclade analysis and they found V88. I'm sure I've read this somewhere.
I don't know. We'll need to find that out after this. But for the time being, that's all I can say is that this is the highest likelihood for Tutankhamun. So, but as far as this ties into Gobineau's ideas and stuff like that, okay, yes, we have a pharaoh here, and he seems to have carried an ultimately European haplogroup, though the problem is that it's not Indo-European in the sense that V88, it's most R1b is Indo-European, but some of it isn't, and V88 isn't. Like I said,
there's not very much V88 among like Yamnaya samples.
No, none at all.
I don't know if I've ever even heard of V88 in that. Yeah, it's very good.
But it is in Sredny Stog.
Okay.
So the Sredny Stog people were steppe herders. But what was happening? But you can tell because the other Sredny Stog men, they carried I2 subclades. So that is basically local hunter-gathery kind of men I think they'd started doing a bit of farming by that point, but they were basically still like Ukrainian hunter-gatherers. They were marrying steppe-herder women, basically. That's what Sredny Stock seems to be, for the most part. Maybe not completely, because like the steppe-herder men must have been in and around Sredny Stock somewhere. But all the ones that we have so far, the Sredny Stock, all the men carry V88 and they carry I2 and stuff. So that's local Ukrainian hunter-gatherer lineages. So, but it's not. They're not ancestral to the African V88 specifically. No. That is like a lineage that came through European EEFs. Neolithic European farmers moved into Africa. Anyway, so yeah, it's like Tutankhamun had basically his paternal ancestors. They seem to have been European. Well, they were definitely European. No matter which subclade, they were European. But it doesn't mean that Egyptian civilization was Aryan, because or Indo-European or whatever, because V88 is not a specifically Indo-European subclade of R1b. That would be...
but Connor, you're forgetting the Anatolian hypothesis and the possibility that the early European farmers were the real Indo-Europeans.
Yeah, even Colin Renfrew, the guy that put that forward, he looked at the genetic stuff and he was like, "Oh no, Gimbutas was right."
Okay, cool, good. I didn't know that. I didn't
know he did. No, he took one look at it and was like, yeah. Most I have to to be fair to the archaeologists, like most of them have been looking at the genetic stuff and they're like, oh okay, yeah. There's a couple of them that might still be just sort of ignoring it for some reason, but I think that's a very bad, like, because
I want to be from Spain.
Yeah. Well, actually, yeah. And Cunliffe was the main guy that was on about that, but like he's been actually a consultant on some of these studies of like the Celts and stuff like that, and it's like he's not going to be able to. I think he's had to like abandon that as well, because of that. So yeah. I think it's just like it was one particular woman who was writing about the Anglo-Saxons, and she wasn't referencing genetics, and she was kind of trying to push this like, oh, were the Anglo-Saxons, were there really that many people coming from Germany kind of thing, and it was like, it's 2020s, it's like we have the genetics, it's like, no, there was a lot of people coming over, like, but anyway, but yeah, it's not going to stand up apart from some of these abuses of genetics. We'll get to that another time. That kind of thing.
All right.
Moving on. China. Now this, with Egypt you might be able to, but with China I really struggled, because he basically made the same claim about Egypt for China, that it was Indo-Aryans moved in from India and founded Chinese civilization. Whoops, I haven't got the dates for when Chinese civilization started. I think it was roughly around about the same time anyway. I think it was around about 3000 BC.
Yeah.
Long story short, like there's not really much to this. Like the earliest Chinese civilization, which was in the Yellow River Valley, they looked at their genes and it's like, yeah, they're Chinese. It's like, that's it. There's no Aryans at all.
Yeah.
There's no European. It's just Chinese people.
Maybe the one dude, the Yellow Emperor, was that what they call the guy who founded Chinese civilization? He supposedly had blue eyes or something like that in some legends. So maybe it was the one Indo-Aryan went there in 3000 BC and said, "All right, Chinese, this is civilization. You do it like this," and that's where it all came from.
That's okay. That is why I'm going to present the possibility based on the Tarim Basin mummies, because technically it's in China. It's not really that close to where Chinese civilization, it's within the borders of China today, but it's not really that close to the Yellow River. But it's still interesting to look at nonetheless, yeah. The Tarim Basin mummies are a really fascinating population. Because they were kind of like they were not Indo-European, but they were related to the Indo-Europeans. They were mostly ancient North Eurasian, which the ancient North Eurasians were a sort of ancient Siberian population that kind of formed the bulk of the Proto-Indo-Europeans' ancestry. And as you can see on this PCA chart graphy thingy here, they actually were more similar to Europeans than East Asians. So they did have East Asian admixture. That's where actually haplogroup R and Q and stuff like that. They are ultimately from East Asia. But it seems like it was the ancient North Eurasians were basically like a smaller East Asian population, mostly men, getting together with a slightly larger European population, mostly women. And that's why they're a little bit more similar to Europeans. And then the groups whose men carried haplogroup R1, they moved into Europe, and that was the Eastern hunter-gatherers, basically. But this population here, the Tarim Basin mummies, they split. They're very closely related. The men seem to have carried R1b2. It was like a very early sort of breakaway from the rest of R1b that went into Europe. And they ended up in the Tarim Basin, and they just stayed there, I guess, and just did their own thing. These are a couple of examples. This is a reconstruction of one of the women. I think that's supposed to be the same woman as the Princess of Zhaohe mummy. I'm not completely sure, but that's supposed to have been.
Yeah.
Well, that's what they're supposed to have looked like, and the mummy is what they look like now. So.
But, so they're not. Hang on, I've just got to clarify something. Iron Age Tarim Basin mummies are very East Asian. Am I wrong about that?
No. So this is like the earliest ones. These ones are from the Bronze Age.
Yeah.
And they get more East Asian as time goes by. That's what happened. So they started off being more European, but that's just because the ancient North Eurasians were mostly European. But like that, I mean, I'm talking Paleolithic European. You know, that's Cro-Mags. Yeah. That's like a really very deep European ancestry. Much like the pre-Columbian peoples of the Americas. You know, we'll get to them as well because they're relevant to this. Since a lot of them had ancient North Eurasian admixture. But yeah, the Tarim Basin mummies, that they slowly just like became more and more just Chinese, I guess, over time. But yeah, so there's so it is possible that somebody from, but again, the blue eyes thing, I think that's a thing associated with like Western hunter-gatherers, so that would have to be like a steppe herder Indo-European group. So like I don't know, like I don't know if there's any evidence. Is that Afanasyevo culture actually? That's the only one that I can think of, because the Afanasyevo culture, that's like Mongolia and parts of Siberia. That's the only people that I can, and that's not these people, by the way, just to clarify for our viewers.
Isn't that a bit too late even? Isn't it too late to be influencing the start of Chinese civilization?
Afanasyevo?
Yeah.
It depends. It's like, shit. Oh, well. I don't know. Like, I'll need to double check with the dates, but I personally think so. The reason for it is basically because, I know we've got more examples to go, but basically, I'll just say from the outset, like, actually no, I'll save it because I do have a specific slide for that. So, but we'll leave like the China bit just with saying it's like, the thing that you said about like the first emperor, the yellow emperor or jade emperor, I can't quite remember, but like whichever having blue eyes or whatever, it's like possibility. Probably not these people actually. If anything,
I'm pretty sure that's a post-Buddhist thing where the Chinese are like, oh, one of the marks of greatness according to Buddhist sutras or whatever is blue eyes, something like that.
Right.
So they probably like retroactively applied that to the founder of this. I don't know that, and I don't know if that's even if there's only just like one source says that and all the other sources don't mention it or something. It's something that I've heard before, and I thought, and maybe this is where Gobineau got it from even, and I thought, that's funny, that almost sounds like white people created Chinese civilization. That's a bit of an own goal if you're going to put that in your bloody mythology or whatever.
Yeah, no, that is interesting, and it might have been better for me to actually look deeper into the Chinese sources for this, but you know. I really just wanted to focus on the genetics. So just to finish off that bit, it's like possibility. Maybe the Afanasyevo culture. That's is Afanasyevo marked here? Yeah, that's the green. So like if you're able to see down at the bottom the green people, there's Afanasyevo there. It's the big green ball, basically, much further east than the other green ball. That's the Yamnaya people. Afanasyevo was basically just Repin or early Yamnaya colony in like Siberia, Mongolia kind of area, and but yeah, even though I'm looking at other parts of China, there's no Afanasyevo at all in any of that stuff further east. There's no green at all. It's just in that sort of area around the mountains in Siberia and stuff. So this idea that like any type of European people had any involvement in Chinese civilization looks very, very weak. Like
complete nonsense as far as I'm concerned. Makes far more sense. Occam's razor. You know. Well, I mean, we'll get to this, I suppose. When we're done with Gobineau, we'll kind of think about what really happened.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on to Greek civilization. We're jumping around a lot, but it's fine. Right. The thing about the Greek civilization, right? This is considered to be the beginning of Western civilization more broadly, which includes the Roman and the Germanic civilizations. People tend to consider Western civilization one thing today, although Gobineau specifically divided them into Greek. He called it Italic, I suppose, rather than Roman, but and Germanic. But even then, there was a lot of Middle Eastern influence on Greek civilization. Now, specifically considering like the classical Greek civilization from about, I think it's about 400 BC, 500 BC onwards. Arguably, that's because of like back migration from Anatolia, because you have the Trojan War, the Trojan War, and basically like that was the Greeks invading Troy, taking it over, and then colonizing the east coast of Anatolia, and of course they just mixed with the people that were there already, so they that meant that there was a lot of influence from the Middle East then going into Greece, and that was influencing the development of classical Greek civilization. So for example, like this Corinthian vase here, this is part of the Orientalizing period, which itself it literally means Middle Eastern cultural influence on the Greeks. It's got sphinxes on it. That's a Middle Eastern motif,
but Connor, I mean, the Middle Eastern people, they're obviously white Assyrians. They might not be Indo-Aryans, but they are white still, as far as Gobineau is concerned.
I know, but the problem is that he's saying that even within the white race, there is a hierarchy, and the Aryans are at the top of that hierarchy.
Yeah.
So,
of course, I guess.
Yeah. So now, I'm being fair here. The Mycenaeans, they did have their own civilization before, in the Bronze Age, before it collapsed, and then the classical so the classical civilization, the Greek civilization we're all familiar with, yes, it has strong Middle Eastern influence that came after, but the Mycenaeans had their own civilization. At the same time, though, the Mycenaeans were influenced by the earlier Minoan civilization. So Mycenaean civilization, you can see there, Mycenaean was between 1750 to 1050 BC. The Minoan civilization started in 2000 BC and ended around about 1450 BC. And the Minoan civilization basically spread out of that place, Knossos, which I've actually been to, on Crete. Spread out from there, took over Crete, and then spread across the Aegean as a whole. Architecture, art, and religious practices were assimilated and adapted to better express the perhaps more militaristic and austere Mycenaean culture. The militaristic aspect, I think, is the Indo-European influence, to be honest. I can definitely see that being the case.
Kourios, is that what they call it? The warband?
Yeah. This kill your puppy. Become a man, kill your puppy.
Shit.
Yeah, it's fucked up. Yeah, so it says the Mycenaeans came to dominate most of mainland Greece and several islands, extending trade relations to other Bronze Age cultures in places such as Cyprus, the Levant, and Egypt. The culture made a lasting impression on later Greeks in the Archaic and Classical periods. Most tangibly in their myths of Bronze Age heroes like Achilles and Odysseus and their exploits in the Trojan War. So, that's from worldhistory.org. Basically, my point there is that...
Cretan.
Yeah.
Sorry, no, Minoans,
yeah.
They didn't speak an Indo-European language.
No. Now here's an interesting thing. The Mycenaeans, yes, they did create a civilization. In Europe, they were Indo-European speaking. They were Proto-Greek speakers. We know that now because they've translated the tablets and stuff, and it is Proto-Greek. But again, they were really heavily influenced by the Minoans, who were, pre-Indo-European people living on Crete, and they were like just like Middle Eastern or like Anatolian farmer kind of people, really. They were just more middle again. So it's like it really struggling to find, contrary to what Gobineau would claim, any evidence of Aryans actually being the source of civilization, by their taking slaves or whatever. It really seems as if what's actually happening is just like you got these random people in these random places creating civilizations, and then the Aryans just show up, and then they're like, they start doing it too. It's not coming from them.
I like that. I have some of that. That's great. Yeah.
So as well, like as far as the genetic stuff, later samples dating from about 1300 BC on Crete varied from 0% to approximately 40% steppe-related ancestry. So yes, the that steppe ancestry from the Indo-Europeans, it is getting into Crete, but like right at the very end. That's actually after the Minoan civilization is gone, basically. So maybe that's why it disappeared because Mycenaeans took over Crete, So yeah, whether you want to see the Greek civilization as being an Aryan thing, well, they did build it, and they were Aryans, I guess. I mean, we're talking about Greek people. They're not very high in like steppe ancestry. It seems to have, again, mostly been men coming in from the steppe, marrying local women, and creating a very sort of hybrid culture. If that, yes, obviously Greek's an Indo-European language, but I don't know, there's just something about Greek culture that's always struck me as just being very local and not so much Indo-European. So, and that seems to reflect the genetics anyway. So as you can see, there's a map of Mycenaean Greece, and it's as you can see, they took over Crete. So So moving on to the Italic and Etruscan civilization, which the Roman civilization ultimately comes from as well. Again, hard to escape the Middle Eastern and also North African influence as well, apparently. So like this, just referencing some of the genetic samples of Latins and Etruscans. Beginning in the Iron Age, there's definitely like Anatolians and some North Africans as well moving into Italy and mixing with the people there. And then, all of a sudden you start getting civilization being built. So it's almost the other way round. It's almost like it's other people from like the Middle East coming in and mixing with Aryans, and that's when civilization starts to come up, kind of thing. That's more the pattern I'm starting to see, you know. And as well, like I've got at the bottom Magna Graecia, the Greek colonization of southern Italy. So you've got Greeks moving in, you've got Anatolians moving in, and you've even got North Africans moving in. And then, you know, you start getting civilization in Italy. So, yeah, I don't really know much more to say about it. I mean,
not looking very good for Gobineau, is it?
No. Again, it's because his thesis is basically that, right, well, first of all, he's assuming that civilization is a good thing, I'm not necessarily saying it's not, but that is the assumption that he is coming from. So he's assuming that it's a good thing, and he's assuming that, well, he's assuming that it must come from the Aryans, because the Aryans are the superior race, because if they did not create civilization, they would not be superior to other races. So it's a bit of a like circular argument kind of thing.
Circular. Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, like with the Romans and stuff like that, I don't know about the Etruscans, but the Romans, like, yeah, they do obviously still have that very Indo-European side to them. But I mean, again, it's not because they're Indo-European that they had a civilization. It seems to have been because they were in the Mediterranean and they were close to other civilized peoples that they started becoming.
If you think about it, they've been Indo-European since the Bronze Age, or the end of the tail end of the Bronze Age or something, and they hadn't done civilization until suddenly you get all this influx of people from, if it's Greece, if it's Anatolia, if it's North Africa or whatever. Pretty obvious what's happening there. Yeah. They were basically like tribal, hillbilly, Italo-Celtic people until. I guess the Etruscans is a weird one, because like they seem to have been the first to take on these civilizational aspects, and it's weird like who they actually are. Genetically, they seem to have a lot of R1b along the Y-DNA axis, so they're clearly related to all the other italics around them. But in terms of, I mean, Etruscan is not, as far as I can tell, an Indo-European language. Their deities don't fit perfectly. There's some overlap, but they don't quite fit the standard. What we now have kind of reverse engineered as the Indo-European pantheon. And the stories at the time, the Greeks were saying they're Pelasgians. They're pre-Mycenaean people of Greece that got pushed out and moved up to like sort of the Alpine regions and ended up in that portion of Italy.
Yeah.
So they're very, very curious people.
I think that all that really says, like, I don't buy that idea that they came from Greece or Anatolia. I think they're just their language and culture is just Neolithic Italian, basically descendants. It seems like I mean, when you look at both the Etruscans and the Latins and their genetics and stuff like that, they are just a mix between Beaker folk, Indo-European people, and the Neolithic Italians. And it just seems like in some instances, you get a mixture, and they're like, okay, so we're a mixture between these two cultures, but we're going to pick one over the other. And it's just the Etruscans are the ones that just decided, yeah, well, we may carry R1b or whatever, but we're going to continue the tradition of our local Neolithic forebears. And the Latins were the kind of people that were like, no, was it Jupiter Volt or whatever, you know?
Yeah, exactly. My brain's going, it's just mummy issues versus daddy issues or something.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, it'd be interesting actually. Yeah, considering like I'm actually even more interested in the Latin cultures, for example. So you have like a lot of women. They have like that very strong like Neolithic maternal heritage, and yet they're sort of being raised in this kind of like patriarchal Indo-European thing, which is all about Jupiter and stuff. So yeah. So moving on from that to Germanic. Now, I think that it's really the Germanic culture, I think, that is Gobineau is drawing this idea, that I mentioned at the very beginning about the one tribe like sort of conquering another and then ruling over them. Again, as for the French nobility and so on, this was what happened because it's been written down. We know what happened because it got written down. The Germanic tribes were Indo-Europeans, but they were bumpkins. They were not civilized. And then they conquered the Western Roman Empire, and then all of a sudden, magically, they become civilized. Not immediately. Like it did take a while. These are a couple of examples of Germanic civilization, particularly the medieval stage, which is not actually as civilized as it became. That's obviously like modern Germanic civilization is much more civilized than like the medieval stuff. But even still, like these Gothic cathedrals, these castles and stuff, they're still much more civilized than what the Germanic people were doing before they took over the Western Roman Empire. But yeah, that's all I really have to say about that. It's not very complicated. It's literally just like, yes, they were tribal hillbillies, and then they took over a civilized people, and then they became Christian, and then they started doing civilization, and they were very imitative of the Romans. Yeah. So, again, it's like it completely. It's weird. This is a bit that I find really weird, actually, because it's like, this is the history that is known. It's not like the archaeology where you have to speculate. Like, he knew this, and yet he still went with the assumption that, like, the Indo-Europeans are the source of civilization. I suppose, again, he said with the caveat of, like, but they have to take slaves from another people and put them to work, and then that creates the civilization and so on. But again, like in this case,
crazy, because in this instance, obviously, Germanics taking over Gauls and Britons and everything, those are fucking Indo-European people. Like, so,
yeah.
They're not a different people. Even he's not even right in his own bloody rubric or whatever.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So yeah, it's not looking very good for Gobineau. This might be the most interesting part of the presentation. So looking at the pre-Columbian civilizations of the Americas. So we are all very familiar with the images on the left. Machu Picchu, the great Incan city up in the mountains, Chichen Itza, a Mayan pyramid. Of course, there wasn't just the Maya. Actually, the Maya were sort of in the middle. I think what were the first ones? Were they like the Olmecs? The very first Mexican.
There's something I read at some point. There's something that's prior to the Olmecs, or they're wondering if it's an even earlier layer. But yeah, basically Olmecs, and then it's Mayans, and then you get Aztecs and Toltecs at some point.
Yeah,
I can't remember which way around it goes.
Yeah. So, but either way, it's like, pyramids and shit. That's ancient Mexico, Mayans, Aztecs, and so on. But then there's also the Mississippian civilization, and I've put more pictures into that because it's lesser known, but it's still really interesting. And that's a map of it there. It's mostly in like the, I guess, eastern half of the United States. And there's just some examples of their the things that they built, like the mound at Cahokia in Illinois, and a statue. That's the kind of art that they had. Now, and these are the three pre-Columbian civilizations. And Gobineau, I kind of struggled to find his rationale behind these civilizations, because he didn't he just kind of talked like about Native Americans the same way most other European did. Is like, oh well, they're kind of savages, what of it, But at the same time, he's saying, but they built these civilizations, and therefore they must have been white or something. So it's like, it's a bit confusing, and I couldn't get the details of actually, like what he didn't go into enough detail about, like at least not in the copy of the essay that I have. I think I may have the abridged version, possibly, but the point is that that he did make an interesting comment as well, which actually just seemed kind of quite sympathetic to the Native Americans, who was basically like, that they don't look like they have a very good future. I mean, like the Anglos are just coming in and just kind of like wiping them out. So, and this is in sort of like the late 19th century kind of or mid 19th century kind of time, and it's like it's just quite interesting from like what's basically a white supremacist, right? And he's just like, oof, just like these poor fuckers, like they're just getting flattened by like the the white Anglos or whatever moving west. So, by the way, like we know a wee bit about the Inca and the Maya and the Aztecs and stuff, because they actually did write things down, whereas the Mississippian culture is purely archaeological. We don't know anything about them. Apart from what they left us behind.
Maybe what they looked like. They were squat people with large cheeks and big noses.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. It's interesting. I wonder who their descendants are as well. I didn't look into the detail for that. This presentation is long enough as it is.
There's a lot of peoples that were in the eastern side of North America, that memory serves were pretty much just annihilated. Or the remnants have been thoroughly absorbed into the modern American population.
Yeah. Even like there'll be like specific tribes that are around today, but they'll like have ancestry from tribes that don't exist anymore, and just got wiped out by other tribes and stuff like that. Never mind the Europeans,
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so this is why I wanted to bring us back to the ancient North Eurasian thing, because what's interesting about it is that, so these statistics I've got on the left here, they show like the rates of ancient North Eurasian admixture in these populations. The highest is among people in the Andes, which is exactly where the Incas were. That's their reconstructed flag on the left. Their a statue of one of their gods, Inti, the sun god in the middle, and then the map of like their empire where it ranged from. But they did come from the Andes, and they would have had very high ancient North Eurasian admixture. Whereas the Eskimos up in the north, they have the lowest, and the rest of it is sort of like East Asian. Apparently, some Southeast Asian as well. Interestingly enough, despite the fact that like these people came into the Americas from Siberia. For the most part, there are exceptions to that. I'm not going to get into that here. Maybe some other time. But I guess the point I want to make here is that it is kind of interesting that, so the ancient North Eurasians, they were kind of white, racially speaking, and it just so happens that the biggest civilizations in the Americas, the people had pretty high ancient North Eurasian admixture, whereas like the Eskimos, for example, they had very, very low ancient North Eurasian admixture, like practically no European ancestry at all. You could also argue, though, that this is probably more environmental than racial, to be fair, Yeah. So just like a quick comparison here, so like these are Quechuas. These are basically the ethnic group from which the Inca came. These are an example of the probably the most the pre-Columbian Americans with the most ancient North Eurasian admixture, and an example of two Inuit kids, and that's the least ancient North Eurasian pre-Columbian peoples. So I just thought these pictures were really cool. You got llama versus walrus people. So this is to get to I was going to say earlier, but my final point here is that ultimately the earliest civilizations, when you look at where they came from, what sort of context they emerged in, all within 40 degrees of the equator, but not really within the tropic itself. The ones in the Americas were maybe the closest to being actually within the tropics, but you'll notice like the ones in Asia and and Egypt, I suppose, they're all on the same latitude. They're just north of the tropics, basically. And probably apart from like this latitude where you basically got like a warm climate it's not too hot like in the tropics, but it's also not too cold like in the further north. But probably I would say even looking at other societies where you had like the potential for civilization. So for example, even before agriculture, places like the Natufian culture in the Levant, for example, and also some of the hunter-gatherer cultures in Mesolithic Europe, up around the North Sea, started to become sedentary because they had basically like what do you call it? That's the word I'm looking for. It's on the tip of my tongue. It's like lots of stuff, lots of resources, like a surplus. That's it. Surplus of food, a food surplus. They're not just getting by with what they're eating. They have more than they need, at at a given time. So it means that they can store, and it means that they can also have like a professional class of people who don't need to be involved in food procuring or food production, so then they can do something else maybe. A lot of the time it's priesthood. But so in all of these examples, all of these civilizations were supported by agriculture, growing crops. But again, like some of the earlier, like sort of, you could maybe call them proto-civilizations. There's one in Chile as well. Were actually seafood based. But the most reliable way to support a civilization is with growing grain. So, because it's very easy to tax. That's the other thing as well. It's like because it can be stored and because it can be weighed quite easily, it doesn't go bad as easily as, you know, fish or something like that. It's much easier to create like a system around its you know, growth and then storage and stuff like that, and distribution. So when I'm considering Gobineau's argument about civilizations, he seems to be claiming that it was all because of the racial superiority of the Aryans, that God just granted them better you know, capabilities for whatever reason. You know, he doesn't speculate too much on that. He doesn't even seem to have been a Christian. He seems to have believed actually quite a lot in natural law, and yeah, it was just like, well, they created civilizations and that's just what it was. Whereas in actuality, it seems like it was more to do with like, well, the people that lived in the places that had the conditions most favorable to producing grain, like domesticating grains and like growing crops and stuff like that, seems to have been much more of a you know, an environment for civilization to grow in, and then those ideas would just spread to other people, you know. So as you can see on the map, that like where the Aryans were, like they were on the Russian steppe, it was nowhere near this area that civilizations were first coming about in. You know, he had to do a lot of mental gymnastics to try and explain how actually these civilizations came from the Aryans. Whereas, like, I mean, none of these are you know, were originally from Aryan people. I mean, look at where they are, you know, compared to where the Aryans were. So I also wanted to mention Africa as well. I'll just do a couple of slides for Africa, because there's been quite a consistent criticism of the black race for just being incapable of civilization. And Gobineau thought this as well. He was just like, well, they're dumb and they can't do civilization, they must be racially inferior. But you know, previous map, yes, outside of Egypt, which again, the ancient Egyptians were not black. That's just a fact. Like, you know, we know that now. No, they did not like necessarily create civilization at those earliest stages, but actually, I think we've got enough archaeological evidence now to show that no, they were just as capable of creating civilization, despite what like lots of people throughout history have claimed. Because and this actually apparently goes back quite a long way. So this example here of the Ghana Empire, this is the earliest African civilization that we know of, and it goes back, again, admittedly quite late compared to a lot of other parts of the world. So it's like the 2nd, 3rd centuries AD. It seems to be starting in West Africa here, you know. And so there probably was like some influence from trade with, so like at this kind of time, like up in North Africa, the Romans were ruling at that time, and you had I suppose also the Nubians, but again, like you could potentially argue that the Nubians were just influenced by the Egyptians. So I think that might be why they're maybe discounted. But I don't know if anybody who happens to be watching this knows more about Nubian civilization and wants to correct me on that. But I've decided to focus on West Africa just because it is an example of an African civilization that's not really very close to other people's civilizations. And it lasted all the way until the mid 13th century. But the problem in terms of how historians have understood the Ghana Empire is that in the Timbuktu Chronicles, they were written by Songhai people, and I'm trying to remember what the Songhai are Muslim people, and I think they're black. Not completely sure, but at the very least, like these chronicles written at this time, they claim that the Ghana Empire was founded by Berbers. But earlier sources, from the 9th to 11th centuries, the only people that would talk about them were Arabs and Iranian people. They don't mention anything about Berbers being involved in the Ghana Empire, and they just say there was black people there. The Ghana Empire, there's like black people country. So it's a little bit suspicious.
The possibility that by the 9th to 11th centuries that any trace of founding Berbers had been completely absorbed into the extant population. But at the same time, I'm actually, my gut instinct is that the Timbuktu Chronicle is off and has been influenced by Islamism, basically, or something like that.
Well, that's actually interesting, even considering things like the Arab slave trade of Africans, because that was in full swing in the 17th century. Like, I mean, obviously, actually, funnily enough, I suppose the 17th century, that's round about sort of like the early stages of the Atlantic slave trade, when white Europeans were getting involved in slavery in this part of the world. But the Arabs had been, they'd been trading, in black slaves for long before that, and I think at this point it was really like I've seen videos about how like the a lot of the African, I suppose, nobility or whatever, like they were really disadvantaging their economies in the long term, not in the short. They could benefit in the short term, but not in the long term, by engaging so heavily in slave trade. So the whole thing of like raiding neighboring peoples, enslaving them, and then selling them either to Arabs or Europeans. And that seems to have been a real problem at this time in particular, in the 17th century. So what's interesting about it is like this idea that the Africans, like black people, are basically incapable of being civilized. It actually seems to have quite a lot to do with the slave trade. And again, to emphasize, not just the Atlantic one, but also like the being taken as being taken as slaves by Arabs as well. So I just wanted an interesting note about the name of the Ghana Empire as well. Apparently it was called Wagadu.
Okay.
It just sounds a little bit like Wakanda, but okay.
I know, that's what I was thinking. It's similar enough, isn't it?
Yeah.
People tapping into some kind of racial memory there.
Quite possibly, yeah. Again, like Ghana Empire was also just the first West African civilization. There were lots after that. There was, I think, the Oyo Empire in Nigeria was another one. So in that part of Africa, in West Africa, the Ghana Empire started up. It was the first one, and then there were lots after that. And of course, in Nubia as well, over in the east, there was quite a lot of that was a thing for a long time. Ethiopia as well, like that's even further back. Now I want to move to Zimbabwe, because this one's really interesting, because when you get to somewhere like Zimbabwe, you're really stretching it as far as like foreign influence on the development of a civilization. The most you're going to get is like the Indian Ocean trade with Arabs. But again, from what I've looked at this, it really seems like in Zimbabwe, the Bantus, they came from West Africa. They weren't in Zimbabwe originally, like they moved in from the north. In the 7th century, they just I think that's when they moved in. But then around 1220 AD, they founded a city on this place, Mapungubwe Hill, right? Yeah. And hang on, sorry, I'm looking at the dates I've written here. I'm getting a wee bit confused.
I am too. So they collapsed about 220 years before they founded the city.
Oh, I must have got the dates mixed up there. But the point is, like, yes, at some point beginning in the 7th century, that's maybe when you have the development of this kind of civilization. The Great GZ is Great Zimbabwe. Oh no, I see how the dating is basically.
Yeah, no, I just saw it as well.
Right,
yeah. Great Zimbabwe started around 1000 AD, and then Mapungubwe collapsed around, say, 1300, and Great Zimbabwe took over that area.
Yes. So thanks for helping me clarify my own fucking notes. But yeah, so there we go. So the Bantus moved into Zimbabwe in the 7th century, and then I think they were doing stuff on this hill before 1220, and I think it's just at that point that a city was created there. Great Zimbabwe is another site that started around about 1000, and then I guess the 13th century that was Mapungubwe's hill. Mapungubwe Hill's heyday was in the 13th century, and then it collapsed. And then Great Zimbabwe that was then like it took its place until the sort of 16th 17th century, which it all seems like it was all internal. Like I can't see actually that's an interesting point.
Connor, it was definitely 7th century. That's the Vandals. It's definitely the Vandals sailed around the Horn of Africa and ended up penetrating deep into sub-Saharan Africa and founding a civilization. It had to be Indo-Aryans. White people are the only people who do civilization.
Yeah. But I mean, this part is really interesting at the bottom. The fact that really doesn't seem to be any evidence of that outside influence on this civilization. Again, Arab Indian Ocean trade. Like with the Swahili language, development of that, possibly something to. They were trading, like they were. This was sort of set up as part of trade, but it really does just seem to be local Bantus setting it up. And apparently the information about this civilization was suppressed by the Rhodesian and South African apartheid governments. I think because probably because they maybe just I guess they just
were embarrassed to have subjugated a formerly civilized folk, probably something like that.
Yeah,
you say?
Yeah, or even just like this thing of like, right, well, I guess just not to complicate the idea of white supremacy, because that's obviously what apartheid is based on. It's based on that principle. It's like, so I mean, am I wrong? I can definitely see where a lot of maybe more left-leaning academics come from when they talk about this kind of stuff. It's not like there's nothing to it. It's just that I'm not going to get into it, but like, let's just say, like, for the time being, yes, this was definitely a thing. That the Rhodesian and South African apartheid governments, they were definitely involved in this. There's been a long process, seemingly going back to the Arabs, of basically trying to make black people feel inferior, possibly just as a way of the process of enslavement kind of thing. Just to as the psychological aspect of slavery, if you see what I mean. So
we treat animals awfully, or have done historically. Arabs especially have done some fucking nasty stuff. If you can come up with that basically says, well, these human-looking things are actually kind of subhuman, and we don't feel as bad about mistreating them. It's sort of like animals, we don't feel so bad about whipping our oxen or anything like that, so you don't have to feel bad about whipping the black people. Mental gymnastics again, but it's
so there we go. Like, Gobineau did not, now again, when he was writing in the 1850s, I don't think anybody knew about these kind of things. They hadn't been dug up. I'm not sure when, but again, like I said, like the
people literally would have found the ruins of Great Zimbabwe, and they would have, in that era, and they would have said, some Arabs or some white people must have been here. Like, that was just baked into people's heads. It couldn't possibly be black people making their own civilization.
Yeah. And again, the other thing as well is, like, even when the Europeans started to colonize Africa in the 19th century, there were civilizations there. It's just that some of them did some things that the Europeans found very barbaric. I don't know, human sacrifice, I think, was a big thing in Benin, for example. So, you know, they were just like, well, they've got cities and stuff. It seems kind of civilized, but actually they're really not civilized because they do this kind of stuff. And it's like, okay, but like, how are you defining civilization in a purely
let's not talk about a Colosseum, right? Let's not talk about literally, like, basically ritual sacrifice, not even for gods, but for people's enjoyment and entertainment. That's perfectly civilized, isn't it?
It's a bit of a double standard there. And again, it's just because it's like, oh, well, the Romans, well, you know, but we take our civilization from the Romans, therefore Romans good. The fucking 19th century Europeans, the Brits in particular, fucking loved the Romans. God. Anyway,
gay.
Yeah. Anyway, but my last point here that I wanted to make, I just thought this was kind of funny because Gobineau was just making more silly assumptions off of nothing. Because to be fair, he didn't have much to go on. But he thought that the Scythians were a Mongolian race, and they just adopted the Mongolian tongue. As you can see from this,
the Indo-European tongue.
Yeah. What did I say? Sorry? Did I say Mongolian?
He said they were a Mongolian race that adopted the Mongolian tongue.
Sorry.
That's impressive. To be able to pull that off.
Adopted their own language, yeah. Thanks for correcting me there. That's what I get for trying to multitask. It's like men aren't meant to do it anyway. Yeah. But the point is, he wasn't really correct about that. Like if you look at this this map with these pie charts here. You could only really make the argument for the Eastern Scythian, maybe the Tasmola people. So the EHG, this blue, Natufian, like that's like reds, that's like EF kind of people. Really, what we're looking for is the green.
I don't know if some people might feel that Natufian sounds like a very African name, but Natufian like means that they're from like the Levant or something. They're Middle Eastern, essentially.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Basically, we're looking at the green, and that's East Asian, like Mongolian kind of people. Yeah, Altayan, like that's right next to Mongolia. So again, if you look at the Eastern Scythians, yes, they are. Well, it's not Mongolian people who've adopted the Aryan tongue. It is Mongolian people who have Aryan admixture. But if you go and look at the Scythians in Ukraine, he's just wrong. They're not Mongolian like at all. Yeah. A wee bit. They've got a little bit of that, like they've got a little bit of maternal ancestry from
Hunnic wives.
Yeah. So that kind of thing.
It's that whole bit in Slovakia or whatever that one is. Yeah.
So that's that. It's just another one where it's like he's not like completely, but he is basically wrong about this. It's like no, the Scythians were pretty Aryan, genetically. And linguistically, it's really, again, with the ones further east, it's a bit more complicated. But yeah, like I think he was more or less just wrong on this. So, right, so that's Gobineau. I don't know if you have any comments to make on his ideas or any of the points that I've made.
Only a pun. Gobineau was just gobbing off. Sorry.
Fair enough, man.
It's all I can add to the discussion. It's just fucking nonsense.
Okay then. Well, with that, we're not just going to talk about Gobineau. It's just two of them. It's just this guy, and this isn't going to be as long. And basically, and tying back to the original thing, it's like focusing on like the fact that in the West we mostly know the term Aryan because of the Nazis, and these are I would say two of the main thinkers that contributed to this kind of conception of the Aryan race and so on. So Gobineau was writing in the 19th century. Gustav Cassina was I think he was born after that essay was written, I think. And he's like the later generation, he's obviously, he died just a couple of years before Hitler came into power. And he developed this Aryan theory further. Now, one thing that I found interesting about Gobineau is that he really didn't go into specifics about where he thought the Aryans actually came from. And a lot of scholars were debating about this kind of stuff. Now, obviously, I've already spoiled it for everyone. It's like, yeah, they came from the steppe. And funnily, there's one thing that's actually really funny. I can't remember the name of this guy, but one of the very first Indo-European people studying the Indo-Europeans to posit a steppe homeland was Jewish.
Well, now
it's quite funny. Of course, then if you're following Varg's idea about the genetic stuff, that makes a lot of sense, but we don't, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, turning to this guy Gustav Cassina, he was an archaeologist, and he was a German supremacist. Like he wasn't a white supremacist like Gobineau, or like Gobineau was an Aryan supremacist, I suppose. Cassina, despite the fact that he was basically Polish in his like racially Polish or whatever, he thought the Germans were the best. He was culturally German, so it was what are they called? Marusians, Vazor. I can't remember. It was one of these groups that are Germanized Poles, basically. And he argued that the Indo-Europeans, the Aryans, that they came from the corded ware culture. Yes, that is true. That they did come from the corded ware culture, and that the corded ware culture originated in Schleswig-Holstein, which is in the north of Germany.
That's not quite true.
No. Now, I think part of the reason for this, he was influenced by this guy called Karl Penka, and his argument was that, right, so since the Aryan homeland must have been in Europe, yes, that makes sense, because as I said before, the Indo-European languages, they're more variation in Europe, so it makes sense that they would come from Europe. We must seek the original, that it's in Europe that we must seek the original Aryan race, and since that brachycephalic peoples, so basically like when you look at the cephalic index, right,
basically people with fat heads.
Yes, the fat heads. Since the Slavs and the Southern Europeans are fat heads, they must be considered pre-Indo-European because there are historically attested pre-Indo-European languages in Southern Europe. So therefore, the dolichocephalic people of Northern Europe must be the original Aryans. You see the train of thought.
That's so funny, because when you look at like bell beakers coming in, you see bell beakers coming in, and like I swear the whole point is that they've got fat heads.
Yeah, so... yeah, they're the fat heads, and the Neolithic Britons, they're the long heads. Yeah, it's fucking.
Yeah.
They were trying. They were trying.
So
Look,
funny.
it was the 19th, early 20th. They didn't have all of the genetic science and technology that we have today, so they had to go from fucking skull shapes to try and work it out. So that's what I'm trying to be fair.
Craniometry.
Huh?
Yeah. Craniometry. They're trying to ascertain which races are more criminal.
Yes, yeah, stuff like that. Which again, it's like, no, it's. I don't want to get into that. I'm not.
Correlation
saying...
doesn't imply causation, something like that.
Yeah, there's. I think that they probably intuitively picked up on certain things, but the conclusions that they went with were just retarded. Basically, that's the way I see a lot of 19th century science. It's like they were
probably the same. They were probably the same, and in 100, 200 years, people will say like, yeah, like they started working on the genetic stuff, and they got some pretty good groundwork. But in terms of the specifics, we might be way off. I have no idea at this point.
Yeah, no,
I don't know what more we could even look into to try and clarify certain things. So.
Well, actually, to be honest, I think as far as things like haplogroups go in particular, and the autosomal stuff, I think that's pretty solid for the most part. I think where we may be struggling with is specifically skin phenotype. That's something we are still struggling with, I think, at the moment, that we've not quite figured out. Like again,
don't get me started on Cheddar Man.
Yeah, well, we'll maybe do one about him some other time.
Maybe.
But yeah, just the last thing about Cassina I find is funny is that that he considered, so he in contrast to Gobineau, he considered the Romans and the French as the destroyers of culture as compared to the Germanic peoples. So, I don't know. Actually, maybe Gobineau did think that way, because he seemed to lean more like the Germanic were the best, and like the Romans and the Gauls were kind of like inferior.
Hang on, the French. Well, the French are part Germanic. Does he mean the Gauls or what? I'm
probably
confused by this.
He was German. Polish LARPing as German. He was, he didn't like the French. Who likes the French? Even the French, Gobineau. Even the French don't like the French.
Even the French. Wow. Oh dear.
But yeah.
Oh dear.
No, it's just
the
funny.
Self-hating Frenchman, of course, that well-known trope.
Yeah. But again, I find it funny as well, because obviously it wasn't just the Nazis, but also this other guy called Houston Stewart Chamberlain, and he focused a lot on the Jews. And we're like, it's the Jews that are the destroyers of culture compared to the Germanic people. But Cosina, he was like, no, it's the fucking French and their Roman ancestors. It's weird as well. It's like Romans destroyers of culture. But I mean, if you're equating culture and civilization, though again, Cosina was not. He didn't necessarily think the way that Gobineau thought. So he might have interpreted, like, he might have considered civilization actually to be quite decadent. And not such a marker.
I think it might even be something like Greeks have got high culture as well as civilization, and then the Romans. There's a view that has crept up at certain points that the Romans had a very kind of like a mechanistic. They stole aspects of Greek culture and spread them liberally, but they were really like engines on a war machine. Culturally, they're kind of limping, maybe. I guess it's some people's idea. It's not my idea, but this might be what he was thinking.
I'm not gonna lie, I kind of see it like that. I quite like what I see of the ancient Greek civilization. When I look at the Romans, there's something about it that really puts me off. I don't know if it's it is the mechanistic thing, I think. Yeah, it's that seems kind of unappealing about them. So even though they just aped Greek culture a lot. So but yeah, so not going to take long to demolish this guy's ideas. This is where corded ware comes from. That's Eastern Europe. It's the Middle Dnieper culture. Yeah. It was kind of like corded ware came about as a result.
Funnily enough, corded ware comes from fucking Poland, so it's
well, not really. That's so further east than funny. Poland. That's more like not Ukraine, quite. Belarus kind of area.
Is it? Okay.
But
for me, I thought corded ware was starting up on the Vistula.
No. The Dnieper, Middle Dnieper, Alex. Middle of the Dnieper.
All right.
But like so you've down to the sort of south and east of this area on the map. You have the Repin culture, the Yamnaya culture, like this kind of horizon, the steppe herder people, and then to the north you have the comb ceramic people. So it's basically R1B people on the steppe, R1A people in the forest, and this is where they come together and happily marry and stuff like that. And it's like, I mean, to be fair, it was the autosomal genetics would suggest that it was local hunter-gatherers were being absorbed into steppe populations, and that this was the resulting culture, and then that spread in both directions, east and west. So east, that's the Aryans, they spread into Asia and so on, and then west, that's the corded ware cultures in Northern Europe, and then like the beaker folk, because they adopted the beaker pottery from some other people. But yeah, that's basically these people. Is this the origins of the Aryans and so on? Kind of, but not really. I mean, like it seems more likely it's the corded ware was one of the branches of Proto-Indo-European culture, and the others were like the Yamnaya culture and the Kvalinsk as well, which is even earlier. I think actually the Repin culture was that was along the Don. Yeah, so the Don is that's the one further to the further east. To the east. The other river that's there. The Repin culture is where the Afanasyevo culture comes from in Mongolia, and the Yamnaya culture, and I'm pretty sure it's where corded ware comes from as well. So all of these seem to have like a common origin in the Repin culture, and it's just the corded ware is just like, I guess, like the sort of northwest variant that has influence from comb ceramic people, and that's why they're a little bit primitive, shall we say, compared to. I mean, it's a bronze spearhead. Funnily enough, they don't take bronze with them, the corded ware people, as they spread west, which is a bit weird, apparently. But they made stone axes that look like bronze axes. It's fucking weird. But the point I want to make, though, about Cosina's argument is that he puts this emphasis on Schleswig-Holstein up in the north of Germany, and that's one of the places where you get most of this haplogroup. And that's I1. And in this kind of period, it crops up really well. As you can see now, it's pretty much Germanic people. That's who it's associated with. You do get a little bit of non-Germanic I1. So there's a bit in Finland that's doesn't seem to be properly Germanic, but again, it's probably still connected with corded ware and battle axe and stuff like that. These kind of cultures, and it seems to come from not specifically this guy. He's a funnel beaker man that they found in northern Germany, in this area, Ostdorf. And it's just a little bit east of the area that Cosina thought that the corded ware culture came from. But I suspect that what's going on here is that, so you have the corded ware culture, they're moving in from the east, and not this guy's descendants, but maybe like a relative's descendants somewhere, got picked up by corded ware people moving into sort of northern Germany and further into Scandinavia. And it just spread. Like I1 is the most common haplogroup among Germanic peoples, even today. So with maybe a few exceptions. I think I remember looking at Jutish samples from Kent, and they had more R1b than I1, for example. But for the most part, I1's the most common Germanic haplogroup. And I think what's happening here is that Cosina seems to be picking up on this thing of like, these are like indigenous people, basically. The men carrying I1, they're like indigenous hunter-gatherers. They seem to have some Neolithic ancestry, but this guy was mostly hunter-gatherer with a wee bit of Neolithic ancestry. But they're maybe not fully kind of integrated into these EEF societies like a lot of other hunter-gatherers were. And then the corded ware people show up, and then they maybe integrate into their society, because these I1 samples that show up, they are mostly steppe herder, really. And if it's not steppe herder, it's hunter-gatherer. So that's kind of the point about these people, is that there's what Cosina seems to have been picking up on is the emergence of the Proto-Germanic race of people. And he's assuming that is the original Aryans, because, again, from Penka's arguments, he's assuming that the Indo-Europeans, the Aryans, they must, because of the skull-shaped shit, they must have come from Northern Europe. So yeah. That's that, basically. Yeah. And just as the last comment here, as far as this question of, like, the Aryan race and so on, if you look closely at this map, it might be a wee bit hard to see because it's such a big map, but basically this is Yamnaya ancestry, is basically identical to the steppe ancestry that the corded ware people had, and the highest rates are found in Norway, Sweden,
Iceland.
Yep, Norway, Sweden, and Iceland. And the second highest,
and Scotland and Ireland.
Yeah, Ireland is noticeably high, and then just after that, Scotland and the Netherlands kind of area, and then everybody else below that. So it's the point I'm trying to make with this map, with this admixture thing, is like, if you're going to consider like the Western steppe herders, the Proto-Indo-Europeans. They were a race of people back in the day. You know, they were a mixture of a couple of different groups, but still, like, they were a genetic cluster. The people who are currently closest to them are Scandinavian people, basically, and then closely followed by people
now,
like the Irish and the Scottish and Dutch.
You've mentioned to me before that there might be some question about relative ratios of strict Yamnaya versus comb ceramic ancestry, R1A versus R1B, and that we can discern between these populations in the north of Europe based on their, is it the Gedrosian admixture?
No, it's Caucasian admixture.
Oh, okay. I'm so confused by those two at this point.
I know.
But I remember you saying something along the lines of Scots and Irish and maybe Icelanders have got more of that Caucasian admixture. Which suggests they might be more strictly Yamnaya, and then the people from Scandinavia have got R1A, obviously, which we've got a little bit of because of Scandinavian influx over the past 2,000 years. But that would be from the comb ceramic area.
Yeah, that's a bit confusing because I think the problem is that I think the comb ceramic people might have also had Gedrosian admixture. The problem is that, right, as the ancient North Eurasians were moving from Siberia into Europe, they seem to have picked up a bit of this Gedrosian admixture. For anybody that doesn't know, the Gedrosia is an area between Afghanistan, Iran, and Pakistan. And it's a particular admixture type. The Eastern hunter-gatherers that lived in Russia mainly, the European part of Russia in the Mesolithic, they had some Gedrosian admixture. And this admixture, that means the Yamnaya people, or the steppe herders, whichever the corded ware people, they had also Gedrosian admixture. But what distinguished the steppe herders from the Eastern hunter-gatherers is that they had additional Caucasian admixture as well, because they you can actually see that on the map here. You see, if you look at the Caucasus, can I zoom in on this map? Oh no, I can't. Never mind. But the point, actually, I can use the mouse. So this wee bit here, that's 40% steppe herder admixture among which people is that? I think that's the Laks or the Lesgins, some random Caucasian people you'll never have heard of. It's because what seems to have happened is Eastern hunter-gatherers living on the steppe were taking wives from among these people in the Caucasus here, and that's where they got that. That's why the steppe herder admixture is so high here in this area. It's actually it's because they were kind of women swapping. So like they were women from
securing good relations by intermarrying.
Yeah, for whatever reason, like this very specific like East Caucasian people as well, like these particular tribes, and then so that's kind of fascinating. It seems to
those aren't the ones that, hang on, where's the Mycop stuff? The Mycop stuff is in the west of the Caucasus?
Yeah. It's not really to do with that, it seems. It's something else.
It used to be this idea that, oh yeah, of course they were exchanging wives for bronze. That makes so much sense, but actually apparently that is not what was happening. So
well, I think this wife exchangey kind of thing, like I think it was happening earlier than that, and I think the exchange probably involved more like cattle and maybe a bit of copper. And the bronze came later. Okay. So, because the Kvalentsk culture along the Volga, they had Caucasian admixture, and they had cattle and stuff, but they didn't have bronze yet. So, I don't think they did. Maybe they had a wee bit. I can't remember. But yeah, the Gedrosian that's a bit confusing actually. I still get confused by that because yes, these people in the British Isles, they have higher Gedrosian admixture than anyone further east. But then if the Eastern hunter-gatherers had the Gedrosian admixture and it's the Caucasian admixture that makes the steppe herders, then yeah, I don't actually know what to make of that. It seemed so nice and neat and stuff before, but now it's all really complicated and brain busted.
Okay, fair enough. But this is still like a more or less, like this map pretty much represents steppe herder admixture nowadays.
Yeah. The point that I'm trying to make,
I'm just quibbling. I'm just trying to out-steppify the fucking the Scandies. I want to be more steppe than them. So,
okay, of course. Yeah, well, you can be in your heart if you really want. I don't know though.
Of course, cultural affiliation. It's not about race. It's about identity, of course.
To some extent, but then it's like, you typically.
I'm trans Yamnaya. I mean, I identify as a steppe warlord, so you should probably hand over your women and all of your resources as well, and let me settle on yonder hill. That'll be great.
The point I'm trying to make with this, though, is that so as far as the idea of Aryan, that's what the Indo-Iranian peoples, they call themselves Aryans. And the Aryan race, yeah, it's kind of like the assumption that the Proto-Indo-Europeans call themselves Aryan is maybe, based on some of the examples that I gave, it's like the corded ware people might have actually had that word, and it might have been related to the Aryan thing. Though it's not clear that that's what they call themselves as a people. But basically, the fundamental point of the Aryan race theory is that especially the so-called Nordicist one, it assumes that the Germanic people are the sort of purest example of the Aryan race, right? The Proto-Indo-Europeans. And with the exception of some people like the Irish and the Scots, and maybe to some extent, some of the Baltic peoples, that actually does seem to be the case. If you're talking like autosomally and culturally more or less as well. So even though the Yamnaya people, they were on the steppe over here, because there have been subsequent movements into the steppe by fucking everyone from the east, people in that's still pretty high. I mean, looking at Ukrainians, for example,
it's still pretty good,
yeah, it's still pretty high. I mean, some of these people, that 8%, that's fucking tiny. That's the Kalmyks. They're a Mongolic people, so they don't have any of that. But so they're not very steppe, even though there are some Yamnaya samples from Kalmykia. They're another thing like the people that are there now. But the people that are most like Yamnaya, Repin, Proto-Indo-European, whatever you want to call it, is the Germanic people, and Celtic, Germanic, whatever. Like these kind of people up in the northwest of Europe, basically. And
Hyperboreans.
Yeah. So yeah, to what extent is it actually correct to consider like this Germanic people or Northwest Europeans or whatever as being like the Aryan race, if you're defining it more as like, well, the people that are the most Proto-Indo-European genetically speaking, the steppe herders, so on. So
yeah.
So that is a question I wanted to raise. Anything else you want to add to that, or because that is the presentation now.
Not. I mean, we could discuss a little bit like the cultural connotations of Arya as a sort of a social element. Like there's a consideration of so obviously. As you said right at the beginning, for Indo-Iranians to be Aryan is basically an ethnic thing. It's to do with your descent. For people in India, that probably factors into it, but there's also a degree of you could sort of de-Aryanize yourself by being an asshole, by mistreating people, by acting in dishonorable ways. You could have your Aryan status. You're sort of expunging it. You're revoking it yourself. Sort of. Giving it up. Do we have this kind of sense? I suppose, like, because we have this concept of nobility, and usually we've got a similar kind of like toss-up between nobility by descent, as in you are an aristocrat in whatever culture it is in the West, and nobility of character. We discern between these two. So I just find this kind of curious that I guess it is just this thing of the idea that people who are noble should beget children who are noble. I mean, in character, and over time that sort of becomes an elevated social position. And over time, as we've seen countless times through history, great people have shit children who act really badly because for all sorts of reasons. And shit people have really good children as well. So you end up with bad aristocrats who aren't very noble at all, and really good if it's peasantry or if it's just yeomanry, commoners like Charles, like whatever the sort of rank and file of society is. It can be very noble, high-minded. Is this a kind of racially we're treating Aryans as a race?
Mm-hmm.
There is this kind of sense that we identify ourselves as the high-minded people. We're people of high minds, maybe not the only high-minded people, I don't know, but we have an approach to each other and other humans and the world at large, I guess, and the gods and all sorts of things that is particularly good compared to the average in terms of humanity. It seems to be what it is, because you're not. If everybody's noble, why have a word for it? But if there are some people that are nobler than others, that's when you start saying, "Oh, these are the noble guys," or whatever.
Yeah. So I suppose the question then is like, how much do you connect that to heredity, as opposed to like just at what an individual is like? This is a really interesting question more broadly because, like, I remember reading this about some of the peoples in, I think it was Mexico, or some of these like indigenous peoples in the Americas, right? And when looking at the genetics, we know where they come from. They come from Siberia. Well, I'm not going to, again, the Paracas, anybody that's interested in this topic should look at the Paracas skulls and what haplogroups they're supposed to have had.
Oh, yeah.
Supposed to have been European, it seems. But the point is that in a lot of these cases... Huh?
Sorry, I was just saying there's a real delay on this one. It's just saying that's a whole Paracas skulls. There's the whole transatlantic travel in BC is a mad kind of question.
Yeah, but I suppose the point is like some of these societies, like, they had myths that they the nobility actually had like a separate racial origin from the people that they ruled over. And in some cases, again, going back to Gobineau and his like observation that the French aristocracy were mainly descended from Franks, and the commoners were mainly descended from like Celts or some other Mediterranean peoples. Yeah, there's definitely something to that. But then, like, can you take the assumption of heredity too far? Because like you've just said, you can have great people and they have shit children, so then your heredity argument collapses at that point, because on an individual basis it doesn't hold up. So it's like, okay, you have noble stock, but you don't have a noble spirit, as it were, if you're there's been loads of people like that. So it kind of undermines the argument that it's that's because a lot of this is nature and nurture. Now, I think just to get political for a second, like my observation about a lot of this woke kind of stuff is that it seems to be like this complete rejection of nature, and I'm talking in this sense, but I also think actually more broadly rejection of nature. But it's the idea that heredity is relevant at all. It seems to be just like complete expunging of any idea that heredity can be relevant, because of course people like the Nazis thought this way, and they used it to do what they did, and that's bad. So therefore, like the argument is that, oh well, don't make that assumption then. Don't assume that heredity has any validity. Basically, that nature has any validity for anything, and it's complete nurture. And there's definitely an argument to be made that like the example you've given, it's like, well, your inheritance doesn't guarantee what you will be like as a person. Like, just because you had a good father will not make you necessarily a good person, for example. At the same time, these kind of ideas about heredity and nature versus nurture kind of thing, like, they did develop because people noticed that children tended to inherit traits from their parents. So again, a lot of
which would have been even more noticeable way back in the day, because we would have had fostering systems, and a lot of like Northern Europe, we would have had your parents wouldn't have raised you. You would have been raised by, if it was an uncle or somebody, or your parents' cousin, or even a more distant relative, and they still would have said, "Oh, you're really turning out like your mother or your father," or whatever it is.
That's a really good point, actually.
Well, sometimes even you get things where it's like, weirdly, the child's more like the uncle or the aunt or something, or more like that grandfather or something. Sometimes it skips generations, or there's some strange. So it's never a strict, 1-to-1. Every generation is going to be like the one preceding it, but there does seem to be a general pattern. I think you're more likely to be like your blood, and then so nature forms the bedrock, and then the nurture is coming. I think this has got to be the prevailing consensus nowadays. Nature is what it is, and you can work within the parameters that nature affords, and how you're going to come out in the long run is down to your environment and how people are to you and how you talk. And also, I bring in a third element, probably. There is a spiritual element. There is something to do with a soul, or I don't know what words people like to use for this kind of stuff, but something that is absolutely unique about an individual that cannot be boiled down to strictly genetics or environment. I think that you've got to allow for that somewhere, because otherwise it's just, you get cases that don't really make very much sense. You get, thieves that give birth to sages and sages that give birth to thieves, and it's sort of, wow, okay, something odd is going on there. That's not sort of expected to be expected.
Well, that's one of the reasons why, for example, someone like Julius Evola, he criticized National Socialism for being grossly materialist when it came to the subject of race in particular, and he had the idea of like the aristocracy of the soul, where it's a thing of like, yes, it's like, yes, you can have like a noble lineage, but it's like you really kind of have to embody it and act like it. And if it is to do with your soul, that might not even be like that's actually more nature than nurture, really, when you think about it. Although I don't know, like that might be actually something that's maybe kind of flexible, if you see what I mean. So it's like because the soul might
it's a different kind of nature. It's not the body's nature. It's a different nature. It's something that's sort of prior to the body. The body is a vessel for that. And then it's if we're going to ascribe, so what's the willing part of a human? What's the part that intends, that wants to do things? That's probably what we'd call the soul, psyche. It's down to what that element wants to do with the body as the sort of raw resource. We've got this vehicle. We can use it in various ways. Right, I'm going to decide to be good because that's my heritage, that's my upbringing, that's what my teachers have taught me, my parents are like that. Or I'm going to decide to be evil because everybody's treated me badly and all these things are expected of me, and all this kind of stuff. So that's I think you've got to have that. There's a sort of leverage point somewhere there that's going to decide far more, I think, even than the raw genetic nature or just the environment as it is. Something about the quality of. It's not very easy to quantize that, is it?
No. Well, it's qualitative by nature, isn't it? As a category.
Well, yeah.
Soul.
It'd be nice if you could imagine sort of like karma points or something. Like you've got plus 50, somebody else has got minus 50. They're more likely to beat you. You know what I mean? Like a video game.
Some of the dharmic religions are a wee bit like that. I've noticed this about Jainism or Jainism, however you pronounce it. I looked into that religion, and it's just I struggle with their approach to things like bad karma, because it's like, don't like hurt anything, it'll accumulate like your bad karma, and that's bad for you and stuff like that. And it's like it seems a wee bit I don't know if it seems a bit like like
I can tell you some really bad karma when you've got like an SS soldier with a bunch of completely innocent people lined up on a wall, and he's going to shoot them all down, and you don't kill him. Well, you had the opportunity to, and it was right there. You could have just killed him, right? Okay, well, you're then responsible for all those deaths. So you didn't kill somebody who killed a load of people. As far as I'm concerned, that's on you at that point.
Right.
I don't know what argument they would bring up about that. I'm sure they've got one, because that situation has come up in India for sure. But it's those kinds of things where I can kind of get Jainism a bit, but it's so over the top. You're killing shit when you breathe. Your immune system is taking out. That's why they wear masks, isn't it? Oh, fuck.
Yeah, it's to not kill the flies by accident and stuff. So,
good God. Trying to be noble, trying to be good and charitable towards other creatures, but I think in the long run, maybe kind of fucking it up a little bit.
Well, maybe we don't really know. Like, I'd like to think that I'd like to think they just kind of break even and just like don't, you know what I mean? Like, they don't leave too much of an impact either way. I would tend to assume that would be what happened. That seems to be the idea. It's like balancing a cosmic checkbook or something weird like that. That's how it seems to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I suppose the only thing only comment left I have to make about the this thing is that like I suppose I actually do feel proud of my heritage, because of the part of the world that I come from. Same with you, I suppose, as well. Like, actually, it might vary quite a lot between individuals, but I'm pretty sure I have quite a lot of steppe ancestry. Again, just even going by the averages, it's just very likely. And even if I don't, like, let's say for example I was to get an autosomal test and I was to find this, like, oh, I'm like 90% like Anatolian farmer or some shit, that doesn't really matter. Like, I value my I suppose my steppe herder Indo-European heritage, and that kind of stuff, and that's what I value.
Same here, 100% the same here.
Hey,
100% the same here. To me, my genes matter far less today than they might have done 10, 15 years ago before looking into genetics and seeing just the degree to which, completely disparate people can actually come together and do the same culture and both be good at it, and that's them, even though they have completely different origins, So if you're talking about Aryans in India, or if you're talking about incorporating early European farmers into corded ware or something like that, clearly they gelled with what was even like Britons becoming Anglo-Saxons in the early Saxon period. They felt something. Oh, I resonate with this more than Romano-British, whatever we've got left over from that. I'm going to do this. And probably some of them were like the most Saxons that you could have found at the time. And they're Brits,
Although there is the somewhat kind of skeptical, maybe more cynical part of me that's thinking like, I get that would have been the case in a lot of cases, but then there might have been those other cases where it might just have been socioeconomically advantageous to adopt the the incoming.
Sure, yeah, there is that. You get all sorts, don't you? You get it every single.
Yeah. So you get like the ones that are like, I'll adopt your culture. Yeah, I love this stuff. It's like, oh god, what the fuck is this? And they're just kind of, I don't know, introducing their own kind of thing, but they're making out that that's what it is, and then they get very confused then. But but yeah, it doesn't matter, because ultimately, like, we can we can look at this stuff and you can just tell, like, I suppose, what resonates with you. To be fair, maybe sometimes there is some sort of conditioning pushing you in a certain direction. I think I have actually experienced that myself. For example, with something like Christianity, which I've subsequently just through personal process learned that it's not really what I want to carry forward. For example, I'd much rather like focus on my pre-Christian heritage, for example. So it just seems to work.
I'll take influence from Christianity because it's influenced so many of our ancestors, but at the end of the day, there's too much in it that, to me, it feels foreign to me. It feels foreign to my blood, and it feels foreign to my soul. I just don't gel with that bit. The bits that I do gel with, I can get them from the Greeks, to be honest. It's all there in I was showing you earlier, Stoicism. They've got that poem of Cleanthes is basically Zeus is Jesus. That's how they saw him in 250 BC or something like that. And the Christians took that, great, but then they added a load of other stuff that I don't get on with at all. So,
yeah. Well, the interesting thing about that even is, like, you mentioned the foreignness, and I assume that the sense of like foreignness when the Abrahamic religions is to do with the fact that they're like Middle Eastern. But actually, when I consider something like Buddhism, I kind of like that's quite a foreign religion, but I quite like a lot of that. But then again, they were Indo-Aryans. Buddha was an Indo-Aryan, for example, whereas Jesus was a Jew.
Buddhism's a really curious one, because it's almost like, so Jesus was a Jew that picked up a Hellenized form of Judaism, so he's Indo-Europeanizing, but Buddha was an Indo-Aryan who was in with all of his, what were they called, Shramanas, who were pre-Vedic renunciates that were still about and are still about, I think, nowadays. So that's a kind of like, he's de-Aryanizing. Jesus was Aryanizing, and Buddha's de-Aryanizing and coming to some similar kind of ground, actually.
Yeah.
But again, like you, I like Buddhism, and there's a lot of it I do like, but some bits I can't. It just doesn't quite do it for me,
I don't know. Like, I quite like it, but that's kind of the point that I'm trying to make, is like, it's interesting considering this is like, I think I prefer Buddhism over Christianity if I'm to compare those two, for example. So, and again, I just find it interesting considering how it's like culturally and racially, like both of them are pretty foreign, but in terms of the sense of foreignness might not necessarily be a cultural racial thing. It might actually be an individual or a personal thing. like on a soul level kind of thing, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
That's where it doesn't always neatly match
100%.
up with things like race and culture.
So I'll tell you straight up, I get on with Taoism way better than I get on with Buddhism. I get Taoism very easily, and there's some things in the fringes of it because a lot of it is not very known very well nowadays. But some things are a little bit odd that are sort of strange developments that came up during the imperial period. But the baseline, when you're looking at Lao Tzu and like all that stuff, he's just saying stuff. For one, I can get it from the Greeks or I can get it from the Hindus. It's the same import is coming through. It's just a Chinese guy saying it, and I mean, especially when you get like the anarchic element where they're like, why bother trying to rule things? What kind of madman do you have to be to want to govern? It's impossible, for one. Everybody's going to hate you when it inevitably goes wrong. Why don't you just sit back and like observe and kind of like, you just manage a little bit as the tides are flowing, as the rapids run, you avoid obstacles and just life is going to take its course. That's if you think we're full rad, right? We knew that Anglo-Saxons had a quasi-Buddhist, quasi-Taoist kind of thing going on even after Christianization. So, yeah, I really get that. And what racial affinity do I have with the Chinese? Evidently, from what we've just looked at, probably none, unless I've got a East Asian, I don't know, grandmother going back where I'm part Han or something. I don't know, maybe. But
Alex, it is. Maybe I'll save it for another day. But it is possible. I swear, it is possible. We have the evidence.
Of course,
But Taoism. I think I like Taoism as well. I think I just haven't looked into it quite as deeply as Buddhism, so that's why I maybe wouldn't mention it as often.
There's not as much in terms of material to look into. You've got like 3 or 4 core texts, of which 2 are the real serious ones, and a load of other extra information that. Because after a certain point, because of Confucianism and Buddhism, it never really became a massive consolidated kind of thing. It was just different people basically fucking off to the mountains and trying to work out how to live a good life, which is sort of the appeal as far as I'm concerned. It appeals to the hillbilly in me. I can't be dealing with this civilization and structure and organization and scribes and scholars and courts and all this kind of shit. Fuck that. I just want to tend some cows or something.
Yeah. But to be fair, I have my perception of Chinese civilization is that they've gone in very hard on that kind of stuff, like a very strong sense of structure and so on, even compared to Europeans. Europeans are getting kind of similar now at this point, I think.
Well, I think there's a bit of cross-pollination going on because they're also getting, it seems to me, even though they've got the CCP and everything, but there's certain elements in modern Chinese society seem to me like they're tending more towards European notions of individualism, more our concept of honor not as a social effect but as a personal attribute or something. It used to. We've talked about this before. We probably shouldn't go into it here. Face culture versus honor culture versus whatever the other one is.
Dignity culture. I think dignity is what you're on about. You're sort of you're happy with yourself as an individual kind of stuff.
Yeah. Cool. Shall we wrap that up there? I think we've done a pretty good round the houses on that. Cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was grand.
I'm just gonna quickly check on the off chance somebody happens to have posted anything in the chat.
A comment or question.
Somebody was asking me to turn my mic up a bit. Sorry about that. I'm not. Which one would be mine? Would it be desktop? It's a bit late now. Sorry about the end here. Is it
for the future? It would be Mick Orcs is yours.
That's all the way up, so I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't. Maybe we needed to.
So you'll have to turn me down and just get it. Yeah, turn me down.
Okay, we'll get it some other time. We'll try and we'll get that some other time then. So, okay, no. So, thanks very much everyone for tuning in, and hope you enjoyed it. Maybe you learned something, and we'll try and do more of these. Just it's been a while. We didn't get any at all last year, and it's been almost 2 years since we started now. So, but hopefully we'll have more from this point onwards. So, cool. All right.
Cool.
Cheers.
Peace, motherfuckers.
Bye.